Guys, our Guilford reps might take more than a few minutes, so I think we should get going. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dummerston, for coming. I do see other residents from other towns here as well, but it's great to see you all. This is the Act 46 WSESU Study Committee. We are not all represented here, but I am Alice Laughlin. I'm a member of the Putney Central School Board, Putney Town School District Board, and Richard Glazier, who is also on this committee with me from Putney, is not here tonight. Do you want to go around and introduce yourselves, and then we to explain? Why don't you start, Joe? Yeah. Why don't you start, and then we'll come around to these guys.
Amy Wall, Dummerston Board, and Dummerston's voting member on the study committee.
Let's skip over you guys for a moment.
Christina Naylor, Dummerston's alternate Act 46 Study Committee member and Vice Chair of Dummerston Town School Board.
Kim Price, part of Brattleboro School Board and voting member, Act 46.
Jill Saltella, I'm the Brattleboro Town School Board and Chair, and the representatives for our Act 46 Study Committee. We're missing Mark, who's not available tonight.
I'm Frank Rucker, the Business Administrator. Ron Staley, Superintendent of Schools.
Lyle Holiday, Director of Curriculum.
So we are missing two more Brattleboro residents who are on the Brattleboro Union High School Board, and the two Guilford residents, what's Beth's last name? Bristol and Alice Reed? Reed. Okay, so, and there is Beth. Okay, so tonight, you are here, we are doing a presentation to every town, 4 towns except for Vernon. We're doing 2 of the presentations before a vote which is happening on December 13th. And that vote has to do with releasing Vernon from the Brattleboro Union High School District. So you're gonna hear about that tonight. In these presentations, the first round of presentations, we're doing a similar slideshow and talk, and then the next round, I think we're going to do that in about 2 weeks. You'll see us again, and that's sort of a more in-depth version of the talk. Tonight, we're lucky enough, however, to have 2 folks coming to talk with us. Emily, I don't know if you're going to be jumping in, but we have Stephan Morse, who is the chair of the State Board of Education. So he will start us off, and then Emily Long is here. I don't know which role you're in here.
I was invited.
Yes.
I'm Emily Long. I actually am a school board member along with many of you folks, and I sit on House Ed Committee. And I was invited to come, so I'm here as a resource, answer questions, whatever.
And she was the Vermont.
I just stepped down
yeah.
after a 3-year term as president of the Vermont School Boards Association.
So we're
Wheeling and Gray High School.
So we're lucky to have folks share some information with us. What we're going to do is Stephan is going to talk, and then he'll take some questions, and then he's been up north all day, so he's going to skedaddle, and then we'll start the official presentation. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. The one thing you didn't include in Emily's introduction is she and I are neighbors in Newfane as well. But I came from Barry, she came from Newfane. I appreciate being invited here tonight. I will make some general comments about how this whole Act 46 process is working throughout the state of Vermont. I'm not here to react specifically to some of the challenges and some of the issues that you have in this. Hopefully we will see your application before the State Board of Education soon, so it would be inappropriate for me to make specific comments. But from the State Board's point of view, Act 46, to our surprise, has been a huge success already. Since July of 2015, there's been an immense amount of work that's been done throughout the state. Some 43 study committees have been formed. There are still some areas in the state that don't have study committees, but it's pretty impressive the number of study committees and how far they've actually gotten in their work. And I would include your study committee when I say that. I certainly follow what's happening here in Wyndham Southeast and in the media, and know that you've faced a lot of challenges, and it's pretty amazing that you've gotten as far as you have as quickly as you have. So I think the state owes a huge debt of gratitude to the school board members and to the superintendents and their staff who have spent an immense amount of time taking this assignment on very, very seriously. Act 46 is obviously a historic occasion for the state of Vermont. The last time we experienced anything like this was in 1892, when the number of school districts went from 2,500 down to 279. So this by comparison might be a little easier than what they did back in 1892. From the State Board of Education's point of view, this major legislation is all about providing equitable education, an equitable education system. We know that some people approach this from an economic point of view, but the State Board is really looking at it from a, how do we provide the most equitable education for all our children in Vermont? We need a system that assures us that every Vermont student has the same educational opportunities, whether you live in a small mountain town or you live in a large Vermont city. With larger districts, more equitable education will be available for all the students, whether it's the arts, the level of course offerings, foreign language courses, sports. Every student should have the same opportunity regardless of where they live. From our point of view, the educational benefits are numerous. Number one, greater flexibility to share students, staff, and resources. Number two, ability to offer inter-district K-8 choice. Number three, grade reconfiguration to address the shrinking school population. Number four, improve communication within the school district. Number five, eliminate some of the bureaucratic redundancies. And number six, it'll be easier for recruitment and better mentoring with a larger school district. Now, I grew up in the little town of Newfane, so I can fully appreciate some of what you're dealing with. I know that local board members and community schools have a long, important historic tradition to our towns. But this legislation isn't about tradition or about history. As I said before, it's really about providing the most equitable education we can for all our children. A number of successful Act 46 applications recognize this and will not allow the closing of small schools for 5 years or so, and then allow the new districts to sell the school to the community for $1 or so. But we need to move on and focus on providing the best and most equitable education for all our students. Education is not about history or tradition. It is about providing the best education for all the students so we can prepare them to be successful in this complicated life. As I said before, I know some of you entered this process thinking there would be huge financial savings. Most of the approved new districts that the state board has approved are looking at annual savings of somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000. As it turns out, and you may be familiar with this, many of the merger's most immediate savings have already been realized under the current system where the supervisory unions have already brought things together, coordinating services, bulk purchasing, et cetera. But again, the board is approaching this more from an educational equity point of view than it is from a financial point of view. And I think that's encouraging that for the success of Act 46, that people are looking at what has already been done at the SU level and said if we even go a step further, we may be able to provide a better education for our children. So since July of last year, the State Board of Education has approved 18 applications. And I learned today that we have 4 more applications at the December meeting and as many as 10 more in January. So for a year and a half, that's pretty incredible to deal with this huge historic public policy issue. Of the 18 applications, voters in only 4 districts have rejected the consolidation. 2 were rejected, or 1 was rejected at election day last week in Berry City. And I understand there's already a petition for reconsideration going around for that. So voters in 58 towns and 14 supervisory unions have merged into 13 union unified districts already and 1 modified union school district. Of the approximately 87,000 students in pre-K through grade 12 in this current academic year, approximately 44,000, or about 51% of the student population, have or will soon be living in merged districts that are served by one board. Huge success in just a very short period of time. Maybe I'll mention one more thing that you've heard about, and maybe I'm saying this more for Emily than anyone else. There's a movement afoot that this legislation, as it was enacted in July of 2015, or went into effect in July of 2015, called this all to come to an end by 2018. There's a movement afoot to extend that by 1 year. I would simply say to you that these tough decisions aren't going to get any easier with an extra year. In fact, today at the State Board of Education, when we were reviewing some of the legislation that might come up with Act 46, we voted unanimously not to support extending it for another year. These are tough decisions, as you know better than I do, and it's not going to get any easier with an extra year. So, in closing, I simply want to applaud all of you for all the work you're doing, the attention you've given us, regardless of what side of the issue you're on. I know these issues are very important, but I think what we really need to look at is how do we provide the best education for our children, and not look at what's been the role of the local school board, what's been the local role of the community school. I think what we really need to think about in this day and age is how we provide the best and the most equitable education for every student, whether you live in Dummerston, Newfane, or Halifax. So I appreciate you inviting me here today. That's a general overview of where the State Board sees this process. We're mighty happy with the way it's moved, and urge you to move forward as well. Be glad to answer any questions if you want.
If you are interested in a question, can you raise your hand? Do we know? So
Why am I not surprised that Norman does?
I don't know.
Hi, Stephen.
So before the chair starts to answer some questions of the Board of Ed, I just want to remind folks, if you haven't noticed it, that there is a piece of paper going around, and we ask that you put in your name and the town where you live. When you speak, and it sounds like only 2, potentially 3 of you will ask him a question, so 4. Please do say what town you're from and your name. We are going to keep it pretty short because he has had a very long day, and we are lucky that he came to talk to us. But let's start with
Me?
yeah.
Stephen, I'm really concerned because I know there are schools that do have issues, and I wish that the state would deal with those that have issues. Most of our schools down here are well above the state average and everything. Our schools are doing well. We've had a supervisory union, as you pointed out, that has been sharing a lot of things over the years. And so I'm just concerned that the state board and the AOE are choosing to go this way of merging rather than dealing funding-wise plus educationally-wise with the students in the schools that really need help.
Yes, this legislation not only put a huge amount of work on the local communities and local school boards and supervisory unions, but the agency is overloaded as well. Their staff has gone down something like 45 people in just 10 years or so, and yet they have this huge legislation that they're dealing with. But I think they're really on top of dealing with all other educational issues, even though they've given a lot of attention to this. Fortunately, they hired a key person from the legislature who played a huge role in getting this legislation passed, Donna Russo-Savage, and she has been incredible in working with local communities and getting this done. I don't know if this is relevant to your question or not, but I just remind you that under the law, the way it's written right now, I don't remember exactly, but sometime in in 2018, if local communities do not come to a decision, the State Board of Education is to draw up a state plan. Now, obviously, that is not going to work as well as local people making those decisions of what should the district be made up of and what kind of district it is. So that's why I really encourage you to work together, even though you may have differences, and see if you can work these things out.
Well, Governor Shumlin said at VPR, he said a month ago or whatever, that this is not going to be forced on us. It was not meant to be mandatory. And, you know, that the school boards and the towns are the most important things to our communities and to our state. So, you know, I just don't understand how the state board and AOE gets to have a different opinion than the legislature or the governor.
Well, I didn't hear the governor say that. I'm clearly not in a position to speak for the governor. But I can only tell you what's in the law is that, you know, there is a deadline that you need to get this done. And if at that point the agency is to bring a statewide plan to the Board of Education, and the board is to take final action on that plan.
He did sign the law.
And that is the
Yeah. So,
Thanks, Stephen. You indicated that the act was not designed it wasn't designed for financial purposes. However, the whole emphasis, primarily the driving force in many, many districts, and this one also, has been the financial incentives, quote-unquote incentives, which have been since rebuked and said it's not really for financial reasons, it's compensatory for transition costs. And the act, as I understand it, was designed to encourage a conversation between the school districts and the communities. In my mind, a conversation is a two-way street. It's soliciting input from the community and also providing information to the community. My experience, which is very limited, it's only in this area, and I know the study committee will argue with me on this, but my experience has been that it has been a one-way communication. And it's been a thou shalt, and it's been on a railroad train designed to get to a date specific, and always above that date was the incentive that was being offered at the time, whether it was a 10-cent incentive or now it's the 8-cent incentive. And we have repeatedly asked for the study committee to slow down so that we could have more discussions about various methods and alternatives. The study committee will say they discussed these. At every meeting that I was, they did mention it. But there's a difference between mentioning it and dispensing with it and having a discussion. And so I'm very concerned about the way this has gone. We're concerned, in Dummerston, we have an excellent school. Our 8th graders were the tops in the state in literacy and math this past year. I'm very, very concerned about what's going to happen to our school. We have a 7th and 8th grade system. Under our current articles of agreement, the district could close our 7th and 8th grade. We're very concerned. It's a very important part of our community, of our local culture. We've asked that the communities have a say if and when the schools would be closed. Well, for the first 5 years, there would be some input from the community. No veto power, but there would be some input. But after that, our schools could be closed without any input or say from the community. And those are very, very important concerns. And if those articles of agreement incorporate that, and which they do, and they've been, I think they're up at the state now, I don't know, they may not be at your board, but I don't know where they go, but we were told that they were at AOE at this point. So, but if they're not, I apologize. But the Articles of Agreement, as they've been printed and disseminated, indicate that these things that we're concerned about could happen. And these are very, very important to us.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but as I said at the very beginning, I think it would be inappropriate in that this application will actually be for the state board at some point for me to comment specifically on this application.
understand.
So
And
yes.
we can, when we go through the slide presentation, we will talk about school closure. Yeah.
I'm Beverly Kenny, and I'm a Dummerston resident, and I do have a question. The other night, I was watching BCTV, and I think it was the Putney session you had, and the question was asked to the Putney principal, what is your opinion of Act 46? And he, to paraphrase, he said, at first I was very skeptical, but as time has gone on, I've come to appreciate the opportunities that will afford my students. And since you are dealing with this on a statewide level, I'd like to have your opinion of, in general, what the educators of this state feel about Act 46. Are they in agreement with the principal from Putney, or?
Yes, I mean, it's very, I mean, I knew when this legislation was making its way through the State House. The State Board actually was playing a role at that time. And again, as I don't want to get into it too deeply, but as a native Vermonter, someone who grew up in Newfane, understanding the importance of local boards, understanding the importance of community schools, I said this is going to be a very, very difficult change in public policy. And I'm amazed, as many educators are, of how this has been. It almost seems like the Vermont world is ready to accept this. I understand there's challenges. There's not everyone that agrees. But the success that this legislation has had in a year and a half is really just incredible. And my sense, Emily can respond to this better than I can, my sense is that normally when you have a huge public policy change like this, within a year or two, the legislature is facing all kinds of proposals to change it. I don't see that happening, and I think that's an indication of how this legislation has been so quickly accepted, and people, as difficult as it is, and I really don't mean to minimize those challenges, how difficult as it is, educators and people who have served on school boards, superintendents, and people involved in the educational community have been very supportive and say, yeah, let's get this done. And I think the numbers I gave you a moment ago indicate that as well. But for example, and Emily can speak to this, the Vermont School Board Association, Superintendents Association have been very enthusiastically in support of this. NEA has, I believe, and have worked closely with the board in implementing this legislation.
Sam and,
Okay.
yeah.
Stan Farrell, Dummerston. Maybe you could give an example about the equity goal of Act 46 and how maybe in one of the mergers it's actually improved I mean, operational efficiencies is pretty easy to see how that would we would meet that goal by combining districts, but what exactly has happened in some of these mergers where
it's a bit
equity's
early,
been
but
improved? Or what might happen in the Agency of Education's point of view?
What we've been told is that, yes, here's a district, it has a pretty decent educational system. But gee, over in town X, there's no foreign languages offered. There's good art classes, but there's not foreign languages. And the town right next door doesn't have any art, but they've got foreign languages. And what will easily happen under this legislation is that all those students are going to be, I'm just picking those two things, there's many other examples I could use, but there'll be, that's the equity that I'm talking about. That those kids, it's not going to depend on where you live and to determine what quality education you get. It's going to be district-wide, statewide, and it will be an improvement, no matter how well run your current system is.
So, one of the ironies, when we look at this, our particular merger, but I think it applies to probably all of them, is that in this town, where we have a very almost excessively funded school compared to other towns, probably our tax rate would go down to the expense of Brattleboro taxpayers, where Brattleboro is the town that has more poverty and has probably more needs. So, and yet we probably have more ability to pay the higher tax rate. So that what this doesn't seem to address is the spending issue, which Axisti obviously attempted to address, but we're not looking at that. We're not, and so we're actually working backwards on the spending while we do this merger.
Well, Sam, I just say, we're going to show you in the slides the tax rates, the impact, and what you said is really not actually the case. So we want to have a chance to just demonstrate that.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't, only because I don't want to specifically, I'm not knowledgeable about this particular situation. I haven't
But it's
seen.
the same as pretty much any.
Well,
situation
that
where
was
you
a
put
general
down
comment that I made earlier in my presentation, that, a lot of people entered this process thinking that, we're going to do it for financial reasons. And that in the range of most of the Act 46 applications so far, there's been savings of $100,000 to $300,000. So not a lot. And again, the reason for that is that a lot of that's already happened with some of the programs, some of the administrative programs coming together at the SU level, and I'm sure that's probably already happened here.
Operational efficiencies,
yes.
That's easy to see. But what I'm more getting at is the different tax levels we have in the different towns.
I'm not prepared to speak about here, and even if I had that knowledge, it would be inappropriate for me to do it. We'll let the committee do that.
Okay, just one or two more. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Ines McGillian from Dummerston. Sorry, I can barely see you. Thank you so much for coming today. I was looking forward to hearing you speak, because I think what we desperately want to hear is specifics about what equity means, how it will be achieved, and whether this law actually mandates it. I don't see anything in Act 46 promising us, or in our articles promising us, that the Super Board will actually deliver on equity, and nor do we know what it will look like or what it will cost. And if equity is more than just operational efficiency, and it's bringing foreign language and art to the outlying schools, it costs money. And where does that money come from? We haven't heard any specifics about where the money will come from to pay for the equity. And the only obvious answer is school closure. And either laying off staff or closing schools, those are the two key fixed costs and it's the only way to find big dollar savings. You're asking small towns to trade the bird in the hand for a bird in the bush that we cannot see. And the bird that we have in our hand right now looks like this. We have 100% control over our school board. If we want our taxes to go up, we ask our school to spend more money. If we want our taxes to go down, we lobby the people that we have elected in our town to lower spending. And this town and all the other outlying towns are trading 100% control over their local school for 10% stake and 10% voting power, and very little say in whether equity will come in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whether our school will be closed. In fact, we were told early on in January, that foreign language would not even be a possibility because it would take years to realize big tax savings. In those years, are the taxes in our districts going to go up? The promise to not close schools will expire in 5 years. What will happen then when equity starts being delivered? Costs go up, taxes go up, and a town that can barely support its current tax rate will have to bear the brunt of that burden. Will the small schools be closed? And for us right now, the bird in the bush is something we cannot see. I was hoping to see slides and specifics on what equity means and what it will bring, whether Act 46 promises it, and I don't see that.
I'll make a general comment, and I think, most of what you're talking about are the specifics of this particular study committee, and that's not proper for me to comment on. I've been very surprised at looking at the number of applications that we've reviewed already, where the presenters are very quick to say, hey, over here there was no foreign language, there was no arts over here, and it's not going to cost us any more to provide that, all those things to all the schools in our district. Just simply that there's a staff person here that's available to go over there. But, I mean, I really can't comment on what's happening here. I'm not knowledgeable, and it would be improper even if I did.
Any more? Any more after, is this the last?
Oh, my God.
Okay.
It goes from bad to worse.
I'm Dick Burstis. I live in Dummerston, and this guy drives by my house more than 35 miles an hour.
Wait a minute.
Do you know his plate number?
Wait a minute, before you go any further on that. So this morning, I drove by your house about 6:40. And I thought there was a big black dog in the middle of the road just below your house, and it wasn't. It was a big black bear.
He was in our backyard the other night, so.
And I said, Dick Burgess has a bear outfit?
Okay, I'm only gonna make a general comment because specific comments to you are not gonna go anywhere. And I really, you know, I appreciate Emily and Stephen coming out. Sorry I'm late, I missed your performance. I thought you were gonna be sort of after the introductions, but anyway, I guess what troubles me the most in all of this, and as much as I've been involved in going to meetings and watching television and seeing this handed down, this mandate, is that it's sort of top down, not sort of, it's top down for sure. And in the process we've heard, well, couldn't it be more flexible? And legislators we know have said, we're going to try to make it more flexible. Maybe they will. It seems to me that there would have been a lot more energy from this town, from Guilford and Vernon and Brattleboro, Putney, if we'd had a dialogue. I was reading something today that Addison Northeast worked on theirs for 5 years. Now this was before, this is other acts, obviously. But they had been talking and having a conversation for a long time, and we barely got into this in January, at least I did, having really not been aware of the topic coming forward and the impact to the town. And I come at it as a longtime member, not a native like you, Stephen, but a longtime member. We came to Dummerston because we believed in the school, and it was a wonderful town to locate. And to lose that struck me as being something that means a lot to people. And it doesn't seem to me that this act has really listened to voices. It's listened, but it hasn't heard those voices out there that say, our schools are important. We want to protect that. And we can't do that by giving the keys over to a super board of 9 people who then will have responsibility for $57 million of budget, which will become less transparent to all of us. And the volunteerism, I think, would go away from local schools. We'd have these so-called leadership councils, but with no authority, and really just a rubber stamp. And so, I guess I was pleading maybe along the way for more open discussion, more time, and that's what we're in the process of doing, is trying to find a way for more time and maybe a more open discussion around this merger. Because I don't think as much time has been spent on looking how we might have unified funding and provided the authority to the central office for a single employer, which are 2 keys, I think, to this whole thing, to make it more efficient, to make it more equity. But I don't think we've had the time to talk about that. So that's where I am, and you don't have to respond, but you need to hear that, because I think it reflects a lot of the feeling in this room.
Should we take another question?
Sure.
Yeah. How long do you want to stay?
Oh, I don't know.
2 more, go.
Two more.
My name is Molly Stoner. I'm from Dummerston. I just wanted to say that I heard the woman over here ask about educators, and Mr. Morse, I heard you very quickly say that educators were in support. And I'm not saying that's not true, but I do want to say that as an educator, I've not been asked, nor do I know of any data collection statewide to do that. So I just, in the spirit of fact-checking, I just want to be clear about that we haven't had conversations as educators about Act 46. I would love to know more about it and to be in dialogue, intellectual dialogue with my colleagues about education and about Act 46 and how it might affect education in our district, and to offer our perspectives. And that hasn't happened. My opinions about it are kind of conflicted, my opinions about the act itself, but I think it's really important in the era where we are right now to be clear about our facts. And I do know that Martha Allen, who's the president of Vermont NEA, spoke out against the cap portion, the spending cap portion of the law. So I also want to just, in a fact-checking way, say that has happened, and I'm going to sit down because my voice is shaking too much.
Let me just quickly respond and tell you of the 18 applications that we've acted on. There's often been a teacher available in the presentation or in the application, some representation of how the teachers in that particular district feel about this proposed merger. And I cannot remember, well, I guess if they were presenting an application, they wouldn't present negative stuff, but everything has been very positive from what we've seen so far.
And I guess I just wonder how that polling happened. That's my question.
I'm not sure there's an official poll or how they,
Hi there, Michelle Siegel. I'm a Dummerston resident and former Dummerston school parent. And I have a question around some of our assumptions about equitability, and I'm hoping that you can maybe address those. I know that when our family left Dummerston School, much to some of the dismay and disappointment of our wonderful community members, I was exercising this unbelievable privilege that many, many people do not have. We were able to choose another school, and that has been a wonderful thing for our family. We had a wonderful experience here at Dummerston School, but we wanted a better fit, a different choice, and it's an extreme privilege, as many people in this room know, to be able to do that. So I'm curious, when I think about Vernon and I think about equitability, they certainly don't want to lose their privilege of choice, and nor, I'm sure there's a lot of other schools that don't either. So I was just hoping maybe you could comment a little bit on that. I'm certainly of a little bit radical, and I think that if we really want to serve underprivileged communities, the best way to do that is to give them privileges. Underprivileged, give them privileges. It really makes sense to me, philosophically. But I wonder if you could comment a little bit about some of those outlying towns that have these grandfathered special deals and how they might be jumping on board with Act 46, or how they might be digging their heels in to retain some of their choices and privileges that they have. And the second part to that question is, through all of the conversations at the state level, what kinds of conversations are happening about the underleveraged resources in the independent school world? There's space there. They want students. I know that's a hot topic, but I'm just curious because
I spent all day dealing with independent schools, and yesterday as well.
Yeah,
so.
But it does feed into Vernon in particular, which is part of this.
Let me make some general comments that. Early on in this process, in reviewing Act 46 and looking at existing legislation, the board realized that the school choice rules had not changed, or laws had not changed. That school districts either have to operate a school or allow school choice for the same grades. I mean, you can have school choice in the upper grades and not in the, but it has to be one or the other. And the legislation hasn't changed. I think philosophically, the State Board of Education supports that. I'm not going to give any names, but there are areas in the state going through the Act 46 process right now where this is a huge issue. And clearly, if choice was expanded, that would be at the risk of the public school that was trying to operate, in most people's opinion. Your situation here, I'm going to, I guess, conflict with what I said. Your situation here, in that you have one town that by law had some extra choice available to them, and I know you've all struggled with that during this process. That's unique. I don't believe that there's another situation in Vermont that had the same privileges that the town of Vernon did. I'm not going any further than that. But.
Okay, it's 20 of 8. So just to let you guys know, our presentation is an hour and 15 minutes, so that's why just 1 or 2 more questions, Stephen.
Sure.
One from a board and one from a Dummerston resident, but we'll do the Dummerston resident first.
Is anyone here that doesn't live in Dummerston?
Hi, I'm Ruth Barton. I am a board member. I'm a member of the WHS board representing the town of Dummerston. Mr. Morse, I don't know how long your family's been in Vermont, but mine's been here since the 1700s. My great-grandfather was on the school board in Dummerston when they forced the one-room schoolhouses to close, one of the worst things they ever did in this state. And my question to you is, my real beef with this whole thing is, if we get into this, there is no exit door. That is the scariest part of it. You get in, there's no exit door. And I will repeat what I've said at a lot of these meetings. Marry in haste, repent at leisure.
Well, I guess my only general comment is that that's why these study committees are so important, that the community very thoughtfully goes through the process and figures out what is the best way to address the educational needs of the area. And hopefully that whatever decision you make, you don't have to worry about that exit door in the future.
There's the key word there, hopefully.
So I just want to point out before Jill speaks is that on December 13th, Vernon is being asked to be allowed to be released from a school district. And so that is an example where a smaller group can get out of a larger.
Not if we don't let them.
Right, but they very much would like, they're asking us to release them, so.
It's such a big hurdle. I think that's what.
Okay, so I'm sure we could talk about this at length, but I'm just giving you the.
This is a public forum. The purpose of a public forum is to talk about issues.
I agree.
We have a knowledgeable person here who can answer questions.
We do, and he can speak to that, but I was just giving you an example of how a town is being released from a school district, so it is possible. Jill, do you want to ask your question?
I have the question, Stephen, if you, in your position, we hear quite often, slow down, there's going to be changes to the law. And you alluded to some of that earlier, but if you could speak a little bit more from your position.
Well, from my position, I served as a legislator at one point, but I'm long gone. I'm not serving in the legislature. I've been very, very well replaced here by Emily.
Yeah, the question probably goes to Emily as well.
Well, but my perception, and this is what I was trying to say in my presentation and answering some of the questions. My impression, this is a huge public policy change. And my thought at the very beginning was it was absolutely necessary, but it was going to be very difficult. And I am surprised, as well as other members of the State Board of Education, of how well this has been accepted by Vermonters. That this was it clearly looks like a matter that was waiting for a solution, and here's a solution that seems to be working across the state. Now, granted, there are still some areas that are struggling with this, but this is so I don't. My sense, I'm not serving in the legislature, but my sense is that there's not going to be any major changes that are going to be made in this legislation.
So I'd like to ask the question to Emily as well, but I didn't know how the meeting was going to be.
Emily, it would be great if you could chime in.
I'm happy to chime in anytime.
Can you chime in on this
I'm
question?
happy to chime in on this one. Thank you for the question. I will echo what Stephen just said. I'm not seeing a lot of push to see the law change immensely, immediately. I do know that there's been a request of some voices saying we'd like to see it delayed. Until we convene in January, I don't think that we know what the appetite really will be to make changes to the law. But I will tell you anecdotally, I get a lot of feedback as a legislator who has, I don't know whether I'll end up on the Education Committee again, but who has been sitting on the Education Committee for 2 years. I get a lot of people saying to me, don't change the law, at least not in the first year of the biennium, because we have spent the last 18 months, 2 years, or however long you've been doing it, engaged in this conversation, and if you change it now, you're messing with everything we've done. So there's that perspective of it too. But I think that it's also important to remember, and I'm hearing, if I can just expand a little bit, I'm hearing a lot of the challenges, and I'm sitting on my own Act 46 committee, so nothing you're telling me isn't familiar to me. I chaired a red committee up at the 5 towns that feed into Leland and Gray a number of years ago. I understand the challenges around this, but it's also really important to keep in mind why we're even having this conversation right now. Why this is even on the table in front of us, why the legislature felt the need to act, and that is that there are some real challenges that we are trying to meet in this state, and I know money is a huge conversation for an awful lot of people, and it feels like it drove this conversation, but even more than that, we are finding we are not meeting the needs of our students in this state, and it's getting worse. Year to year, we're seeing a divide. Children in one school are getting an education that they're not getting in a school 5 miles across town, down the road. And that's not okay. And the opportunities that the law has provided people is to have a conversation about what do we value about our education system in the state of Vermont. And there are a lot of people who are taking that conversation and coming up with a lot of really good ideas around it. But as far as big changes to the law, I'm not seeing it. Our demographics aren't showing it. We lost, last year we anticipated a loss of 800 students in the state of Vermont, and this is on the heels of decline for the last 20 years. We lost 800, we were supposed to lose 800 and we lost 1,200 instead. And if that continues to go, and all of the data is showing that it's going to continue to decline for a while, but if it goes in that depth, we really are going to have to seriously find a way to make sure our kids are getting educated and our taxpayers can afford it. So that's sort of where we're sitting right now on that.
Okay, how long are you? People are probably gonna keep asking you questions.
Well, but you have another part of this.
We do, we have an hour and 15. So, do you wanna ask a question?
Well, there's a gentleman in the back that had his hand up.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that.
My name is David Wheeler, and I'm a parent. I live in Dummerston. We have 4 small children, all under the age of 10, and our youngest is unborn. So I'll be in the system, this school, for a long time, 13 years to be precise. So my question to you is, I don't like, well, I guess my statement is that I don't like the feeling of wondering after a certain period of time that my school could close out from underneath my family, or that the junior high could close, and that our representation on the school board could be minuscule, so we wouldn't have any power to say any different. And I just wanted to make that statement as a parent sitting here, listening to all of this.
I would just suggest, since Stephen said I could respond, I think that is out there anyway, with or without Act 46, given the demographics we're facing right now. And well, I mean, none of us really know what the future holds, and I sat on that committee listening for a long time and really fearing that if we don't act locally, having these conversations and making decisions locally, that may happen to us without our control. I can give you an example. Brookline and Newfane merged and they closed a school out of serious need. Their tax rates were going up like 30-some-odd%. And I don't want to see us in that place. I want to see us find a path forward so we can keep our small schools open. That's the key. And we talked about that an awful lot as we were mulling over aspects of the law.
Most of the applications that we've acted on to date have, they've included small towns as well. I'm not sure I would consider Dummerston a small town, but even smaller towns. And there's usually a provision that the schools are open at least 5 years. And as I referred earlier, that the school has, the town where the school is located has a right after that 5 years if it is closed. Some of the applications, the town where the school is actually located has veto power on whether it closes or not. Other applications, it's a district-wide vote. So, but that's the type of thing that, that locally within the district you ought to be working out.
We try.
So I am going to cut off
I
the
want to
questions
contradict
other
what
than.
Stephen says.
Excuse me,
I wanna-
I'm actually talking right now.
I know, but
please.
you're the chair, we're
And
here
I
to
am,
listen.
and I'm recognizing Christina Naylor from Dummerston. And then because Stephen has been here longer than he initially was going to be able to be here, I'm going to.
I want to contradict him though.
Let him go. And then we're going to start our presentation. And then the presentation's over an hour, and then there's a long question and answer period. But if Stephen, you could just wait for Christina's
Sure.
question,
Oh,
and then
yes.
we
I
thank
just
you for
have a
coming.
very non-specific question about our area, but it's been very hard for us to have the conversation because our Vernon situation, as you well know, changed during the process, and it was sort of a reversal on our understanding. And the AOE guidelines for the alternative structures as provided by the legislature have not even been finalized yet. They're out for comment. So in terms of us being able to have the conversation, we're quite hobbled in that conversation because the story has changed. And for us to be able to present to people in the town what is really going on has been really challenged. And so in terms of the extending the deadline, the conversation really, in terms of what the final ruling is, hasn't even come yet because we don't have guidelines from the AOE.
And they've been released earlier than originally planned. And so
it's very hard to have the conversation when you don't know what the rules are. As a recovering school teacher, I tend to like to let my students know what's going to be on the test so that they can study for it and I can teach to that test.
well, the rules are out.
But they're out for comment, so they're not finalized, and they
Right.
just came out for comment, and we've been meeting. I spend more time with these people than my family, so, it would have been very good to have those guidelines beforehand. Hindsight's 20/20, but it'd be very nice to give communities the opportunity to have a conversation when they're informed by the rules, what the final ruling is, and that's why I would urge the Board of Ed to consider the extension of the deadline so we can have those conversations. I'm not afraid of the conversation.
I don't think was a major point that we made today to oppose the extension, but it was just more of a philosophical point that, things don't get any easier with an extra year. And, if it's the will of the legislature to extend it, I don't think that the state board is going to get involved in that conversation.
Okay.
But it's helpful hearing your comment.
Alice, I have one sentence.
Can you wrap it up for us after you have one or
I
two?
have one sentence, just even.
Yes.
You mentioned 55 districts have done this. I have a list of about 55 to 60 districts that are either said no, they've gone alternative, they've disbanded, or they're stalled. So I don't think that it's really all one-sided at this point.
Or successful.
Well, what I found particularly encouraging, I just got this number today, that of the 87,000 students in Vermont, over 44,000 or some 51% are included in these 18 districts, the 2 supervisory districts and the 1 mud district.
It's all cities, Chittenden County.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome. You got a quick question that
I really just have an announcement, if that's all
okay.
right. Michael McGillian, I'm a Dummerston resident. I'm also on the Dummerston Town School Board. The school board has agreed to meet after this presentation to answer questions that residents may have. So immediately following the Act 46 presentation, the Dummerston Town School Board has made itself available to answer questions that residents of the town may have, or neighbors.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank you,
inviting me.
David.
Thank you.
So guys, can we turn the lights down? They should be light enough though, because we have articles of agreement that we would like to share with you. And Paul Smith will pass those out. So shall we turn it on? It's warming up. Are the lights going to get down?
Share them around.
Yes, I do. Technology.
Otherwise it's all.
I know. So just take some time. I think we're all doing. Can we all just do it? I just wanted one down. Okay, I'm going to get started. I guess the lights are going to dim slowly. We've done this several, that's even dimmer, right? I know it's helpful actually, guys, to refer to the articles occasionally throughout, so if they will dim, let's try this, okay? And if it's driving you crazy, we'll switch. Again, I'm the chair of this committee, and I tend to, we've done this, as I've said, a couple times. I will start us off, and then when we start to get bored of my voice, I will notice and I will pass it off and we'll switch back and forth. The presentation is called Four Towns Joining Together to Educate Our Kids. The four towns, as you know, are Dummerston, Putney, Guilford, and Brattleboro. Why now? As we heard from Stephen Morse, it's the law. It was signed into law by Stephen Shumlin, my neighbor, or was for years. I have no idea what he was saying when he meant that it wasn't mandatory, because he did sign it into law. It's 65 pages or so maybe he didn't read the whole thing. Obviously I'm joking, but we know it's the law. Act 46 was designed to address the increasing cost and widespread inequities of education across the state. So our study committee learned a lot over the last, hundreds, almost 1,000 hours of meetings. We learned that the law requires districts to create simplified governance structures that provide substantial equity in the quality and variety of educational opportunities statewide, lead students to achieve or exceed the state's education quality standards adopted as rules by the State Board of Ed at the direction of the General Assembly. They're to maximize operational efficiencies, to increase flexibility to manage, share, and transfer resources with the goal of increasing the district level ratio of students to full-time equivalent staff. They are to promote transparency and accountability and deliver at a cost that parents, voters, and taxpayers value. The 5 towns of the WSESU created an official study committee. You see many of us here, to figure out how best to comply with the law. Over the last year, the study committee has met more than 30 times. About the study committee, it hasn't been easy or happened quickly. It has been a long, drawn-out process with lots of meetings. We have met not only these 30 plus, literally thousands of hours of meetings for some of us, in study committee meetings, in small group sessions, at the central office, up north, Montpelier, Barry, many settings. Points of process: disagreeing, discussing, researching, listening, understanding other points of view, clarifying, and more discussing, much more discussing the same things over and over again. Seeking to find common ground that all can support to benefit our students in schools. Major sticking points, there have been many. Understanding the law. We have been confused about the law. Other people have been confused about the law. The committee has a very good understanding of the law right now. Keeping local voice, key to the process, maintaining school culture, and school closure. We talked about it today. Obviously, we'll talk about it more tonight. We will read over the article. What's not in this presentation is the language of the article about school closure. We've talked about that for hours and hours. Talked to our boards about it, brought it back to the study committee, talked to our boards back and forth. And we voted to approve this language. No doubt we might talk about it again, but this is the language you will hear tonight is what we've recently voted on. And board composition. That is something we will also share with you tonight. And I think the committee is now leaning in one direction. Why don't you jump in, Amy?
So this is just some basic information. We didn't want to assume that everybody understood what WSESU is. It's Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union. It consists of, it provides administrative oversight and responsibility for the town school districts, and it's overseen by our superintendent, Ron Staley.
That is who this guy is.
Ron Staley. And a supervisory union is an administrative, planning and educational service unit. Lyle Holliday is our curriculum, one of our curriculum coordinators, along with Paul Smith. They have the general responsibilities of aligning curriculum within our district and helping all of the schools within our member districts achieve the appropriate levels of educational standards. There we go. And WSESU right now consists of Brattleboro, Dummerston, Putney, Guilford, and Vernon. That's a K-8 program for most of them. Brattleboro Union High School is separate from this. And each of our WSESU board members has their own school board, like Dummerston's Town School Board, Putney's Town School Board. We send 3 members from our local boards to sit on the WSESU Supervisory Union Board and to work with central office staff to make decisions about the operation of the supervisory union. In one of the previous slides, it talked about transparency. One of the things that voters don't have right now in terms of transparency is a great deal of knowledge about how the WSESU Supervisory Union spends money and what it spends it on. Typically, that's approved by the WSESU board, and in a proposed merger, that would be up for discussion with the public, unlike it is right now. So. And a school district, Dummerston, it's a publicly governed unit, and it's an independent municipality. It's responsible for providing education to all of its students, according to state and federal guidelines. And Dummerston School offers a K-8 program right now. And we obviously each have our own public boards that you vote town meeting on members to oversee the operation of the school and implement policy. The boards generally don't get into the day-to-day operation of the school. Our work is focused more at the policy and financial end of things. And we're an employer. Just like the WSESU, so our 5 member towns plus WSESU all are independent, separate employers. So
we are one business.
One business, yeah. And a school is, in addition to these things, it is oftentimes, and I've heard Joe Carroll say this, the safe place in a child's life. Our demographics are changing in our supervisory union. It hasn't reached Dummerston quite yet in terms of behaviors and socioeconomic issues, the opioid issues, but I think it's coming. We see it in Putney.
We see it in the numbers.
Yeah, we see it significantly in Brattleboro, and so we expect it to trickle down to Dummerston level as well.
So before Amy moves off on what is a school, so a school is Dummerston. This is a school. In Brattleboro, they have several schools. There are 3 elementary. It's a district, the Brattleboro School District, Town School District. But the 3 elementary schools are 3 different schools.
Plus EES.
Yes,
So
so others,
Head
yeah.
Start in 2 different places, 3 different places, plus including like, it's all under the
Yeah.
Brattleboro umbrella.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Brattleboro Union High School is its own union school district. It encompasses Brattleboro Area Middle School, the Wyndham Regional Career Center, and the Brattleboro Union High School. And it is made up of the members of the town supervisory union. So in terms of quote-unquote ownership, it's owned by Brattleboro, Dummerston, Putney, Guilford, and Vernon. We all share in the responsibility for that, that operation.
Is it the towns or the school districts who are a member of BUHS?
I
Do
believe.
you know?
Frank, you?
It's the school district.
It is the school district, yeah.
School districts,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
And we have kids at our regional career center and BUHS District 6. What other towns come into that?
Sending schools from all of the regional high schools that would send students to the career center.
I think we
Leland,
added a slide.
Is it a slide?
There might be.
Leland and Gray, Twin Valley, Bellows Falls, Hinsdale.
if you want me to keep going, or you want
You want to jump in, Guilford?
Sure. So why keep schools open in the small communities? We've touched on this evening, but Vermont recognizes the important role that a small school plays in the social and educational fabric of our community.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sure, I'm sorry. I don't know that I need to talk too much about why to keep schools open in here. We've talked about it quite a bit, but I'm gonna paraphrase instead of reading that and just say that I think the cultural impact and the fabric of our towns is really demonstrated in our schools. So we all know that Dummerston School and Guilford School and Putney School are all very different. We all have different values and what's important to us. And that's something that is recognized and certainly valued here at the committee and also mentioned in Act 46. So Act 46 requires districts to create a simplified governance structure. We're looking at programming opportunities for everybody, making sure that outcomes are based on a continuous improvement plan. The hiring structure becomes more universal for retaining and hiring quality staff, removing obstacles from regulatory agencies such as the IRS and Labor Standards Board regarding shared employment. We've talked a little bit about that in our study committee meetings. The ability to share our teachers across different districts right now is difficult. It would not be difficult under a merged structure. Cohesive leadership team, creating a capacity for meeting the challenges in all schools. So right now we operate very much in a silo and face each of our individual challenges individually. Whereas under a merged district, we would be able to theoretically bring down those silos and work together to solve those problems cohesively. Leveraging the benefits through previous consolidation and special education. So as we've talked about before, the consolidation of special education happened, was it 1 or 2 years ago now? 2 years ago? And so using the lessons learned from that, we're hoping to see a similar outcome through this merger. And also reviewing policy and strategy through a cohesive lens. I think that I've touched on that already. Yeah.
I want to just jump in for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Lynn. So, one thing that always strikes me when we look at this, that the one hiring structure for all employees, that we have a specific situation between Guilford and Brattleboro this year that came about, and I say this every time and these guys never say anything else, so I'm gonna assume that what I say is correct. That it came about kind of on its own, that pure happenstance or serendipitously, however you want to look at it, that there was a third time teacher of art over at Guilford, and we had a position that was open at Green Street. And that teacher at Guilford happened to be able to come over and take that position that was only part-time at Green Street, and it was the corresponding amount nicely fit. And the two school boards then actually had to hire. So Guilford had already hired this person, and she went through an entire other position, applied just as she wished to do, and then came into us. And the Brattleboro School Board happily hired her so that she could have that. And then the principals worked it out so that the time could work for her to be fully employed and do what she needed to in the two schools. But that did not happen because we were looking for one full-time teacher. And how long could that teacher sit at Guilford waiting to pay off her debts and do whatever she needs to do? I'm fairly sure she would prefer to I don't know her, sometime we have to meet her because I keep using her as an example, but it's I'm sure she would prefer to earn a full-time salary than a part-time salary and corresponding benefits and packages and all of that. So it's one of those examples that's already happening. We hear people sometimes saying, well, why can't that happen all the time? Great idea. But I'm telling you right now, it's not happening. And it only happened in this particular case because it happened. It was not something that certainly our board or their board sat down and said, let's make this happen so it's good for everybody.
Why do you think that was?
I didn't even know she existed. Why would I know?
You said it's not happening.
So they probably have something to do with it. That's why I say they never say anything when I bring this up, but.
We do have 3 positions in Dummerston that are shared among other schools though, so it is happening.
We have somebody sharing too at Brattleboro and Dover.
We always
It does
have.
happen, but it doesn't happen as fast or as easily as it could in a merged system.
And certainly not convenient for the person who's.
And right, because those people have to be hired and they have to go apply.
But I mean, just that we are very familiar with that.
My point isn't the shared position being a unique thing. My point is being that it didn't happen so quickly and easily. It had to be a little bit prodded on. Finally, they're saying something from central office, but it wasn't quick.
Right, but that's something that could be solved without Act 46. This is an operational issue. Can I ask a question about?
It can't be solved that easily.
I keep reading the that there's the expanded opportunities for kids, and I think to Inez's point about the bird in the bush that we can't really see. So could, my 8th, 7th grader here at Dummerston School who doesn't get world languages go to BAMS for world languages?
Possibly, let's keep.
But I think that's
Not right
like.
now. No.
No, but I'm saying after the merger.
Sure, we're gonna get to that in a minute.
But I think program is important. Yes.
So there's a half-hour more presentation.
I'll just point out a couple of documents
That's what we've been putting up with.
in here that will be confirmed by the slide. So after page 11 in this document, there's a listing of a program overview, 3 pages.
Yeah.
And that's really looking at all of the different programming that's in all of the different schools. And we did this intentional study, and it showed us that there wasn't the equity that we actually thought there was in this district. And so you see things like behavioral step services, after-schools tutoring, summer programming, other programs like that are not foreign language, that are not consistent throughout the school. Then if you skip past the next 3 pages where it has school enrollment data, it's these next 2 pages which talk about expanded opportunity. These are some of the models that we could spend some time on. I know they're going to be cited in here, but because a unified district, you could spread the cost over 2,400 students versus 120 students here or 100 students in Guilford, which is the state formula for the per pupil costs. And every time I sit in budget meetings in small districts and they want a tech coordinator or they want foreign language, it blows their budget. It goes over the state cap, they're in the penalty, the taxes are some of the highest in the state. And this point shows that you could, in a unified system, share these opportunities and spread them out throughout the district. And so an example of your child having summer school programming at the middle school, there's like 30 or 40 slots available at BAMS. Or it could be a situation where Dummerston and Putney merge their resources and offer a session up in here. So those are some of the things that you'll see that are highlighted.
The vision for that program isn't fleshed out, where
So that would be
to lead with that, look at all these great things that we all can have. They're here, but they're just ideas.
Well, they're not our job.
So an example of pre-K programming.
Yeah.
Right now, we're working with Guilford and Brattleboro to, rather than have Head Start at the Canal Street site, we'd like to have a melded program within the schools. Dummerston is a perfect location, but they would never qualify based on their poverty rates. But in a unified system, they could. So those are opportunities that we've identified. We couldn't put them into place yet in a 6 distinct districts.
Right. You want to do this one and then I'll,
This is pretty much just.
yeah, we just talked about this, so. So among the many things the study committee studied and discussed, academic programming, extended day programming, summer program, enrichment, and I'm gonna go through this list, okay? Title I, buildings and assets, pre-K programming, support systems, school choice, which we'll talk about later, test results, staffing, student placement, building use by community, administrative time, enrollment trends, small school sustainability, community culture, technology, efficiency, finances, special education, class sizes because they range, school sizes, per student costs, endowments, capital plans, scholarship funds, and music and arts. We found differences in equity, differences in the quality and variety of educational opportunities in our schools. So equity, do you want to quickly jump in?
So, equity, it's not it's not equal. It is different than equal. Equity is about providing students, no matter where they go to school, with access to high quality education and curriculum and instruction. And it's also opportunities to go beyond regular programming to enhance education beyond traditional academics. And it's allowing them to have access to technology and the hardware and the software and integration that right now we currently don't have at Dummerston, but would really like to. One of the many things that we've wanted to have. But it's things that are available in other schools throughout our district. And
another example that comes to mind, and I think Jill has spoken to this before, is most of our students come together at the high school level. And in talking to high school teachers, they'll recognize the fact that our students come in at different levels. So what one student got in Dummerston is different than what the student got in Guilford. And that's a challenge. And so how great would it be if we were able to make those students come in with as equal of opportunities and equal learning platforms as we could. So that's what I think about in this is,
And we also found differences in costs and in what communities spend on their schools. We've talked about sustainability. Every member of this committee wants to make sure that our small schools stay in our local communities. And we, like Mr. Morse said, we, like others in the state, we've been watching enrollment trends, and within WSESU, we started out with a little over 3,000 students in 2002, and as of this year, we've lost a little over almost 700 students. We're down to 2,300. And I'm sure those of you who follow education and think forward into the future, there was a report here recently about the birth rate being lower than it ever has been. So it's a little disconcerting, to be looking ahead at our student numbers. So overall, throughout the WSESU and its member districts, we've seen a 22% decrease in student enrollment. The blue line is Dummerston, the yellow line is Guilford, the orange line or red line is Putney, and then the gray line is Vernon.
Would you please change that slide, because if you look at Guilford, where they take the steep cut, that's when they sent their 7th and 8th graders off to bands, so that is really skewing Guilford. And I don't know what else is skewing.
We usually mention that.
Well, you haven't in the last meetings I've been to.
Okay.
I remember us talking about it, but, yeah, do you want
So-
to share that?
So the key issue there is it went from 212 students to about 136.
It's, my question, my point is it's not correct, Ron, and it needs to be correct.
Okay, but to be clear, this is the drop.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay, and so that could be level because
Yes.
these kids are advanced, but that's the drop.
And you'll also see in the BAMS numbers, they raised,
But it
obviously.
skews the percentage also. And when we get to the high school, you can see that that's the one that really skews.
Well, Jill actually did a check, what, 20
Yeah,
years?
so
No,
Jody, you
40
had
years.
been asking for this.
Yes, I'm curious.
So I did it, another 4 or 5 hours of my time. So
Thank
here
you.
is, there's 25 of them, there's 2. Now, I'm not an Excel whiz, so they're not as nicely done, perhaps they could. But, if you want to pass them, sir. Pass around, but take 2 sheets. So I took and went back to, and there's one mistake, I inverted numbers. The first number is not 1997, it's 1979. I know, 1979, and this is what Barb actually had there. The numbers we've been using here are numbers that were on the AOE's website, so they were easily obtainable. This was in a drawer, had to be PDF sorted through, so.
What does it say?
44 pages worth of data. Basically, it says here that we've all gone down. I mean, that's your bottom line. So Brattleboro, these are town schools, started here and dropped down. BUHS, not surprisingly, did the same thing. Here's Dummerston from 1979 to 2016. Here's Guilford, the same thing. Putney and Vernon.
So Vernon's more than they were.
So anyway, I'm going to pass it to someone who can make it look a little prettier, and we'll put it in the next presentation. But I wanted to have it for you guys tonight because Jody had been asking for this.
It's struck more than
Several times.
more than that.
It's much more than the 22% if we did all the numbers, which I'm sure Frank can do.
Well, I know one year Dummerston had a blip for 3 years where we had 200 and something students, and I don't know.
226 students in 1975.
75?
You have 153 now.
Yeah.
So
That's a huge drop.
Has the committee looked at what portends for the future? Have you looked at birth rates in the last 5 years?
Yeah, we've talked about it. Paul talks
You've
to
got
all of us
that?
about that.
Yeah.
How many kids were born in Dummerston last year?
Not Dummerston, I mean, 5.
5.
5. How many does it? It's a similar downward trend. I don't know.
But
I'll
I
put it that
talked
way.
to somebody at the polls the other day who moved into Dummerston just for the school. They weren't born here, so.
Just saying.
And I moved to Putney for the school, so we all moved to our towns for a reason.
But I think
So-
Emily related to that earlier saying on the state level, you've been looking at that, and it's the downward trend is there.
Well, it's even steeper. The trend is, in the last year, went a lot steeper than we thought it was. And it goes out to 2030. The decline goes out right now till 2030.
So guys, there is a lot of time for questions at the end, and it's 20 of 8, so let's keep going. I know there are questions about this. So this slide is Brattleboro Town School District. You see it goes up and down and up and down, and it's really down, okay? And BUHS, there we go. Where do we see? Yeah, so 104 and 14, 18. 104.
Guilford's in there.
Guilford, yeah,
For the 7th.
that's what I'm saying. All right.
So along with the declining enrollment, you take the cost of educating students, which obviously has not kept pace with the decline. It's actually continues to increase despite local boards' best efforts to control costs. And you have declining enrollment and you have increasing costs, and it's not a pretty picture. And it's one of the things that's driving, this Act 46 discussion. So in 2005, fiscal year 2005, the state average for per pupil spending was almost $9,000. WSESU schools averaged almost $11,000 in fiscal year 2015. The state average was 14,000, and the local average was almost 16,000 for students, and that represents a 56% increase in the state average and 45% increase in the local average.
So we're not doing too badly relative to the state, that's right.
So we looked at lots of available options for mergers, and we have considered the unique situation of our neighbors in Vernon who either join us and lose choice or go out on their own, which is why they've asked us to vote to allow their district out of the union on the 13th of December. And we have come up with a merger proposal the study committee believes to be the very best option for the kids. A merger that complies with the law, allows small schools to stay open, improves educational opportunities, and addresses the many, many concerns in the community, in all of our communities. The merger offers our communities more value. It builds on our strengths, retains our school cultures, it celebrates our school cultures, and addresses our weaknesses. It offers an opportunity for community involvement to be increased. So, Jill, do you want to touch base on the leadership councils?
Fortunately, I have my contact info.
Okay,
good. So leadership councils, there's school-based leadership councils that will be established at each school. And that will enable local input on school-specific programs and activities. The council will have a chair, a vice chair, clerk, and community representatives. The district board will actively engage with district communities and individual school leadership councils. The district board will regularly send a representative member to individual leadership council meetings. Now, this was a really big point that we, as the study committee, wanted to ensure we put into the Articles of Agreement. It's something that legal counsel advised us against. However, we felt to help enable individual schools continue to have their voice and to continue to keep their local flavor and ability, we wanted to make sure this was put into the Articles of Agreement as not an addendum, but as an actual article. Who is on the leadership councils? You have the school principal, one staff member appointed by the district board chair, 3 community members nominated at town meeting and voted on at town meeting that will then be appointed by the district board. So that is those are people that the local communities have chosen that they want to represent their school. And 1 student representative selected by the school principal for participation, not all the time, for when it's appropriate. Obviously, there are some topics that are not appropriate, especially for elementary school age kids. So that would be, that would not be every single moment of position.
How would the staff member get selected?
That would be, I believe the school principal would be. Yeah,
It says appointed.
By the.
That was my question.
Yeah.
I
Sorry.
was wondering if the 3 community members are nominated in a democratic process, why wouldn't the
Yes.
same happen for a school?
Oh.
Why wouldn't the same happen for a staff member, be maybe nominated by the staff?
Well, we honestly didn't spend a whole lot of time on that.
Yeah, I mean, and I
We
think
did
that
talk about that, and I don't know if we actually ended up specifying that, but that was something we were all enthusiastic about.
Yeah.
Well, I made that point the last time we had a public forum on this. I said, why don't we have the staff member be elected by the staff?
Yeah, I know.
I asked you to consider that.
No, we have definitely talked about it, so we'll bring that up at our next meeting.
I'm also wondering why you're specifying that the election is for the community members be at town meeting rather than by ballot, which is how all of our other representatives are elected.
Because
yeah.
there was a legal ramification on that.
Yeah.
on why
What is
we-
the legal ramification? We elect everybody by ballot.
We don't want they don't want an elected official.
I think if I remember Chris Leopold's advice, he said that he was concerned that the study committee doesn't have the power to create elected positions.
That was it, something.
And you can't just create an elected position. The legislature has to do that. It's a legislative power to create an elect. So he has kind of finessed it by saying they get nominated by the town, nominated. So it's not an election, and then the board appoints them. So in essence, it's sort of accomplishing the same thing without having an election or creating an elected position by somebody who's not a legislature. My only concern is that if somebody is appointed by the board, can't they also be removed by the board? And so, you know, how independent is this leadership council? I don't really know. Also,
They have specific responsibilities that are written into the articles. It's assisting, the responsibilities include assisting in the coordination of local school committees and advisory organizations like the PTFO, or the endowment committee, the food committee. They are going to be providing recommendations to the unified board on budget development, capital investments, including buildings and grounds projects, and technology and library resources. They're going to be making recommendations to the superintendent and the principal for the school, or for schools. Sorry. They're going to make recommendations to the superintendent and principal for school-specific practices and procedures related to district policies. And these type of things, recommendations could include things like facility use, so that communities continue to have access to their buildings, because that was a concern that we heard, you know. That is not the intent at all. You know, the building will remain a community building. Technology acquisitions are another one, and then any school-based activities. And then the Leadership Council also has a responsibility of making sure that practices are consistent with state statute and procedures established by the superintendent, and they're going to serve on the hiring committees for school staff and faculty. And our hope is that, well, at least in the articles, another responsibility is coordinating and reviewing individual school performance data with the central office, and then providing yearly activity reports to the supervisory and district board. We, like Kim said, we went against legal counsel advice to keep this as an appendix. We wanted this to have teeth, and I believe it is one of the articles that cannot be changed by the local board.
That's not true.
You know, I'm speaking, and then you can. It is one of the articles that cannot be changed unless there's a vote of the electorate.
That's not true. I'm sorry,
It's not
I have
true.
to jump in because it's just not true.
Well, that's what our legal counsel
I
has said.
recently
So.
rewatched the video, and if you look at
Says
hour
school board.
1 minute 38, Chris Leopold gives his specific advice on this, and I urge all of you to go look at the video from June 13th.
says
Chris
school
Leopold
board.
specifically goes through all of these articles and says which ones can and cannot be amended. This is one article that can easily be amended because it is not in the statute, which there are two things that can prevent these from being amended easily. One, it is included in the ballot and the warning, or two, the articles themselves provide that they can only be amended by either a unanimous vote or a supermajority. If you don't have this in the ballot, or if you don't have a provision in these articles that says that they can't be amended easily, this provision can be gone the day after the unified board forms, and all it would take is a board vote.
Could I just make this? These are the articles that you quoted. I will confirm this again. Article 15 for sure is one that cannot be changed. When it was an appendix, that was the concern, that he wanted more flexibility for the school board. The ones that he cited, number 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 14, and 15. We were very specific. Let me just make the last point. He was very specific with us that 15, the leadership councils would not be changed if they're in the articles.
But there's a reason why, Ron, and the reason why it cannot be easily changed because it is in the ballot, okay? And he is talking about a statute. It is 706. I don't have my reading glasses on. I will find it for you in a minute. But the reason he's saying that they cannot be amended is because there is a statute that says that they can't be amended easily if it is in the ballot. This provision is not in the ballot, unless you choose to make it so.
Based on your
Do,
conversation
but I
last
object
time,
to
he disagreed with
misinformation.
you. He disagreed with you.
He does not. Watch the video.
So I guess that what we all agree on is that we can check once again,
Yes.
because it sounds like what we thought we were saying is what you were hoping that's being said, and you don't think, I remember that being very confusing in the meeting that I had several times, and I gave up on trying to understand. So let's.
So I will put that on the agenda for our next meeting to confirm our understanding from legal counsel on this.
So,
do you,
Just one quickie question. Will the leadership council meetings be open to the public like a school board
Yes.
meeting is?
yeah, and they'll have minutes and be warned.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So how would the school governance structure be different? Well, you're gonna be taking all the separate entities and we would be one together with one unified district board and then the 10 leadership councils. And the leadership councils, they're school-based, so there would be one for each school.
I have a question, I have a quick question. Why would leadership meeting councils be warned? I don't see it in our articles, and it's not a legal entity.
That's my
so-
understanding, but
It's not a legal entity, and it's not in our articles, so I've never thought of it that way.
it was my understanding that our approach would be similar to what we're doing now, regardless of.
With subcommittees in the SU, we do that with the BAMS committee.
So those aren't, this isn't a subcommittee of the board, super board, it's a not legal entity at all. So you're not bound by open it wouldn't strike, I mean, if we wanna put it in the articles of agreement, but I don't see it there and I don't understand what would be governing.
So any committee that the board would say was a committee of the board would be warned.
I thought it was like a parent meeting, but we warned those, so we would just want them to be warned. I didn't know that it was a legal question here. I thought it was normal.
I mean, procedural thing that we
Like,
do.
well, warned versus announced, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
To me,
All board committee members or meetings are to be warned and it's to posted.
And just so
If
everybody.
you're not, then you guys should.
No, I'm talking like a legal entity, all boards, subcommittees of legal boards are warned.
Yeah.
And they follow open meeting law. This is not a legal entity, it's,
But it would be
Not elected.
It would be a subcommittee of the board.
So we can put that on our list.
yeah, I think it's a
Chris,
question, I think it's a
we're
question, I mean, just, if we're telling
Yeah.
the public things are gonna be warned and they're this entity, I've never heard that nor thought that, I thought they would be announced or something, so I was just curious.
And just so everybody knows, I see Dan already taking pictures, this presentation is on the WSESU website. So if you wanna go back and review the information, it's easily accessible to you. And if, for some reason you can't find it, then you can, contact the central office or your local school board or any
It's
study
also in the
committee.
Brattleboro area.
Is this one on? Because the last time I looked, which was a while ago, it was the basic one way back when, before it's been changed and changed and
They get
changed
updated regularly.
and put on the website.
Yep.
Is
So
the
can we move
handout
on?
also available at the WSESU?
Yes.
The
Yes.
articles of agreement are on there, yes.
What's not on there is my lovely documentation from tonight.
Yes.
We're gonna get to that.
But it will be, right?
It'll be switched over to something Frank will make look pretty.
All right.
Are you guys feeling confident in the role of those leadership councils? Because just reading that at first blush, that is a tall order. And there's no power. So you're asking people to do a lot of work that will go up and then potentially go nowhere. It seems very disempowering to that
Well,
council.
these are people who hire, I'm on the committee to hire teachers, so I actually think they have more responsibility than many others. Did you wanna?
Well, it's hard for me to say because I don't know exactly what all you do on the Dummerston School Board as opposed to the Brattleboro and opposed to Guilford Putney. We found in our discussions that it is a different role in each town. But what we have talked about from Brattleboro is that we really like it in that it combines teachers and parents and board, which is not currently happening particularly for us in Brattleboro. I don't know that it happens probably more in the smaller towns.
In Guilford, we currently have a leadership board where everything is combined. Teachers, parents, staff are communicating regularly and have been doing so for quite a while now. and it really has improved and helped the culture within the
And they're actually
school.
doing this stuff, coordinating and reviewing individual students.
They don't have the
Not-
same agenda.
Not
It's not the
everything
same.
at this point in time, but they're working towards that.
Yeah, but there would not be a local school board, so the budgetary part would be passed to the leadership council, but again, it's kind of exciting to think that a teacher's sitting at that same meeting when you're talking about the budget. Right now, at least in Brattleboro, how that happens is more between the three principals, and they sort it out, and I assume there's some input from teachers, and then they tell us what their priorities are when we start to talk about numbers and how to get there. So it would be a bit of an expansion, and it would really be nice to have the teachers and parents all in the same room with the board.
Yeah. I was just gonna say the Guilford board was actually excited about this, thinking that it would give us more opportunity to get involved in things that right now we don't have the time to, because we're kind of confined a little bit in what we need to oversee and budget stuff and like we said, policy and procedure stuff. Whereas a lot of the activities on the leadership council is more getting involved with the activities at the school, and that's not something that we really have time to do right now, so we were pretty excited about that opportunity.
I very much appreciate that you've worked hard on keeping this and making it an article, but I do want to give you more feedback on that, and I agree that the fact that it's going to be a hiring committee or included in the hiring committee, it's a little bit vague, would mean that we would have a great stake in that. I think there would be a lot of community involvement in it, and it's our one, what's left of our local input and our school board. What I don't like about the way it's worded, and I would encourage the study committee to simply, if there's a question about whether you can create these or not, send it to the Agency of Education and see. Don't pussyfoot around some lawyers, well, maybe you can't. So I haven't seen those remarks from the Agency of Education. Are they up there?
They're not at the official stage of giving us remarks. It's important. So as you probably know, we've been attempting to do,
Send the
process
articles.
for a long time.
Right.
And before Vernon pulled out of the process, the Agency of Education had looked at the articles several times, not yet officially, but the process with Act 46 is that once you sort of have even a rough draft of articles, you start to share it with the agency, and they give you feedback.
Right.
So they have definitely.
I saw the feedback. I saw the comments.
Yeah, so they've definitely seen them several times. At this new stage, they have not officially been passed off to them,
Right.
because we need to go through the vote with Vernon
I'll
first.
tell you this, they very much support this.
Yeah.
It was actually a year ago, July, not this July, but a year ago, when Amy was part of the first group that we met with the Agency of Ed and other reps,
Right.
where we started to talk about a school-based council like this. And they have since incorporated this in other merger models. So they very much support this.
And when I first spoke with Secretary Holcomb about it, and she heard the intensity of our communities about
Right.
local input, she
Right.
said, this is perfect for you guys.
Right, so there's got to be a way around this normal elections process. It seems to me that we would just elect these people the same way we elect our school board members now. There shouldn't be a problem with that, as long as the entity is not a legal entity that's not going to be, looking at making decisions about the budget.
I think what Inez said earlier is the fact that you just can't do it the same way you like to do it.
It can be, our option was to have them appointed at town meeting, on a voice vote, and then it would go to the unified board, and then the unified board would not acknowledge the appointments, and they would be off and running.
But I understand your concern and your interest, and I think we can find out the language of the rationale and share that.
Okay, the other thing that I'm very concerned about is the board member that is then appointed to the Dummerston Local School Council, or the Guilford, whatever, and that it's not necessarily the Dummerston board member. And I heard some feedback at a previous forum that the study committee was thinking, well, that would help with the the local school council having the bigger picture about the whole district, but I don't think that's the point of the local school council. I think the point of the local school council is the Dummerston School, and I don't know if the study committee is getting too much involvement from Dummerston citizens and feeling like, well, they've got their blinders on, they're only thinking about Dummerston School.
The intent is the Dummerston board member would be on that Dummerston school-based council.
Well, can you tighten up the language?
No, we can't, because legally we are all, this new board would be responsible for all students. But the assumption is that is what would happen, but we cannot put it in.
We talked about that because that was something that the Guilford board really wanted as well, is to know that our representative would be on our leadership council. And we couldn't put that in there as a direct tie. But I mean, it just makes sense. I don't know, you're right, it would be nice to have that, but I don't know why you wouldn't do that. Right. So it gives you some flexibility, I guess, if you wanted to go to another school, you could, but I mean, I can't imagine a situation where we wouldn't do that.
That's very
So
frustrating.
if someone was sick and needed to attend a meeting, that would be the only situation that you would kind of float somebody to another district.
To fill in, yeah.
So can I suggest we keep moving, because there is time for questions at the end. So, originally, we've talked about many options of what this board would look like in terms of representation. When we voted on the articles, most recently, we all agreed for the hybrid version, which is on the right, and I'll explain that in a moment. There have been several conversations over the last couple of months about the proportional option, but it looks like we're pretty clearly still heading in the direction of the hybrid version. Should I explain these, or does someone want to jump in?
I don't mind.
Go ahead.
So the proportional model is, as you would expect, proportional. So Brattleboro, based on population, Brattleboro would have 6, Putney, Guilford, and Dummerston would each have 1. The specifics about that would be that the ballots would not be commingled. So Dummerston would elect the Dummerston representative and Guilford would elect the Guilford representative. The downfall, of course, is that Brattleboro clearly has a supermajority. The hybrid model, in contrast, allows for proportionally a little bit different scenario where we have 3 at-large representatives that could be elected from any of the towns, Brattleboro or the outlying towns. And then, as you can see, Brattleboro goes down to 3, and then Putney, Guilford, and Dummerston still have 1. The upside to that is that you have the potential for the small towns to be better represented. The downfall to that is that the ballots would be commingled. So the entire population of Putney, Guilford, Dummerston, and Brattleboro would elect all of those representatives. So
Why is it being set up like that?
that's the law.
The way that this whole thing is, that
Change the law.
What we're doing in this is becoming one unit, all caring about all kids. So in order to get to the hybrid model where we have at-large, we're all voting on the at-large. That's the mentality behind it.
On everybody.
We're all voting on everybody, yeah, but the at-large in particular doesn't come from any one town, and we all vote on everybody. And that way we're all.
And Guilford knows the people to vote from Dummerston, and the Dummerston people know who to vote.
that was our concern from Guilford, is that we
Yeah,
would
you
know,
don't know,
or
right.
little Janie Sue
It's
down the
not
road,
an
but wanted to
entity
run,
vote.
would never have a chance.
Well, we do vote for elections, other people that.
Yeah, I think you've highlighted the concern. And so the Guilford board was more in favor of the proportional, but yet then it's a hard pill to swallow that Brattleboro has 6.
Yes.
So it's kind of not a great scenario.
Brattleboro's going to have 6 anyways, because Brattleboro's got more votes and they're gonna vote for Brattleboro.
And one thing, so silly, Jody, that's thinking that everyone in Brattleboro votes the same. Have you ever talked to anybody in Brattleboro?
I talked to a lot of people in Brattleboro.
And we do not at all agree on things.
So
It's
I'd
amazing.
like to share 2 things about the proportional models that have come up that you know how you look through things with a certain lens after a while, and someone says something to you in a passing comment and you're like, oh, wow. Molly did it for me this past weekend, where when I was doing my straw poll of Dummerston people I meet about their feelings on the different models, her comment to me, and I hope you don't mind, Molly, was that.
No, just know that I did first say my initial gut reaction. I remember
Yeah,
because I thought about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna share another part of it though, was instead of with the proportional model, instead of voting for just one, you said to me, you mean with the at-large, I have the option of voting for all 9, so that, and that was something to me that I hadn't really considered before, that if for some reason the person on the ballot for Dummerston does not share my particular opinions and beliefs about public education, then I have 8 other opportunities to vote for people that hopefully are more aligned with my thoughts and feelings about public education. And that was sort of an aha moment that I just wanted to share with you guys, because, after doing this, after the thousands of hours spent in meetings, and then not even including the outside time, I thought it was just a revelation to have that aha moment. And then,
But Amy, one has to be from Dummerston, so whether you
there's a
vote-
didn't requirement, yes.
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 So whether you vote for them or not is a non-issue, because one has to be from
Can
Dummerston.
I say one little thing about what I'm glad I'm kind of consistent, because I was thinking similarly in my head back here, where I was thinking that, as a Dummerston resident, yes, I'd love to have Dummerston representation, but my biggest concern, were we in a consolidated district, would be that we get 9 members who I feel have the best interest of kids in mind and are best educated to serve the kids and have a variety of different kinds of things to offer, like maybe some legal experience and some financial experience and some educational experience. And so my feeling is that trumps any sense of sort of parochial, town-based vote.
Well, if I may, just because it's pertinent, it should be pointed out that even though Dummerston would be able to vote on all 9 members, Dummerston's voting power would be greatly diluted to 10%. So even if you feel like you have a voice in voting for those 9, your voice will no longer be determinative. Because even if all 3 towns allied their interests and agreed to vote on the same slot of candidates, Brattleboro has 70% of the voting power and could outvote you no matter what. And I am not predicting how people will vote in the future. I'm just pointing out the reality that under either proportional or hybrid, the small towns in a larger district, because we're merging with a much larger town, your voices will be diluted no matter what. And the reason I favor the proportional model is because each town will get to elect its own representative, will be able to know what the ballot count was, and that person has a legal duty to represent our town. In the hybrid model, it's not just 3 that are at large, all 9 are voted on at large. So other towns are voting on your resident. That resident cannot legally only represent you. They have a fiduciary and a duty of loyalty obligation to everybody in the district. And if they start to advocate for only Dummerston or only Guilford or only Putney, Brattleboro would have a lawsuit. And so you're not going to, the problem with the at-large model is that it tends to dilute minority voices, or it definitely is a method for ensuring majority rule, and it has been challenged in other contexts in court and been struck down because it has a dilutive effect on a minority voice, and that is clearly what the small town is going to be in a merged district here. And it's why I urge the proportional model.
I think regardless, we can debate size. The intent here was, like the leadership councils, to really strengthen the local voice. This board, or this committee, has felt very strongly that local school culture and local school voice has got to be maintained for this to be successful. And that has been an underlying principle throughout this entire process. So,
I guess I would like to point out, because I have done it at other forums, that Brattleboro has remained neutral on this issue, which has been really lovely and supportive of having the small towns work out their voice. So I want to make it clear that Brattleboro has stepped aside from this discussion in the most honorable and collegial fashion. The Dummerston School Board did vote, and the Dummerston School Board does prefer the directly proportional model. So we'll see what happens in the final analysis. But I just want to be clear that Brattleboro has not weighed in on this at all.
So the only thing that I will say, and I've said what I was saying right now, I just don't see Brattleboro always voting in a block. I just don't see it as people. And we don't now as in general. I mean, I don't see any of the boards ever voting in a block. So the fear, I understand completely, and that's why we're out of this discussion. This is your discussion. But I think the fear that we all would somehow be of one mind on any sort of it just doesn't really happen in Brattleboro.
And I remember, you reminded me of my second point, which was, besides the aha moment, which was something that Alice shared, and I forget if it was at our last study committee work session or if it was another time, but it was, you did an analysis of the Brattleboro vote, and I think, you know, majority of the time, Brattleboro seemed to support candidates. Yeah.
Residents who lived in other towns.
Yeah, so it's, you know, in other.
It happened most recently.
Yeah.
It just happened in the last election.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not a guarantee, but it does give you an indication that, you know, Brattleboro does seem to be thinking independently about its elected officials, so.
The thing we agree on is revoting things.
Yeah. So I do want to, one quick comment if you could. Yeah. Okay. So let's keep going. So what about Vernon? Beth?
Sure. What about Vernon? Vernon has been asked to be released from the Wyndham Southeast Supervisory Union District 6 in order to maintain their school choice. So they are not at the table. They're not part of our committee meetings any longer. They were in the beginning. They will then be individually responsible for complying with Act 46, and they will now tuition, if they are allowed out, they would then tuition their students to BUHS and or whatever other high school they so chose. So that's the vote that will be becoming before us on December 13th.
I have a question about, you know, the school choice piece again and like sort of what's gained, because I do have a 7th grader right now, and again, great experience at Dummerston School, but she was kind of outgrowing it and would have been ready for BAMS in 7th grade, but I would have had to pay out of pocket. In a consolidated school district, would I be able to make those choices? Yeah. Yes. Similarly, would I be able to say, oh, we don't like this teacher this year in Dummerston School, let's go to Oak Grove for 5th grade? Could I also do that? Can I jump around the whole?
Not necessarily.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out like what's the, you know.
So we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
We'll get there. I mean, I think we'll get there.
This school choice in Vernon is a little bit different than what we have proposed in Article 17. Article 17 for school choice, which is intra-district.
Yeah, because this seems kind of vague, like if it's the operational needs of the school, or it doesn't really quite spell out for a parent, like
Yeah.
what do I get?
That's
What
because
am I gaining?
policy can't go into this document.
Yeah. So what typically will happen is you set like a percentage of incoming and outgoing students, maybe 3 to 5%, because you don't want to have just an influx, a total influx that would hurt a small school, and the small school can only take so many students without affecting staffing. So that's what Article 17 allows for. So it would be your example of a Dummerston student going to BAMS, or a Putney student going to Dummerston, and that sort of thing.
And a couple
So you guys
examples.
do see that as part of the vision of
That's-
opening
that's-
up?
that's in here.
And another
Yes.
benefit, and maybe I'm ahead of the presentation, but another benefit in Guilford, we notice a lot of students coming in and out based on the families relocating. And we see the impact that it has on the student having to move schools. They wouldn't have to move schools. If they wanted to stay in Guilford, even though they no longer resided in Guilford, they could do that. And the other thing is, if you had a parent who worked at Vernon School, or Vernon's a bad example, worked at Putney School and I live in Guilford, I could theoretically, as long as we don't go over that percentage of in or out, I could bring my student to Putney, which is a huge benefit for family members who may work in other communities.
I know Putney teachers are quite excited about that.
Yeah.
So there are so many, okay, so let's have questions on this and then we'll keep moving, because I know some of you do want to walk out the door at some point.
Regarding Vernon, what percentage of the Vernon kids right now come to the high school?
About 80%.
So when they're out of the district, their tuition rate will be higher than their assessment as a member of the district?
No, it's actually, frankly calculated that, so it's pretty comparable.
I was just wondering if you would anticipate that they could end up spending more money, contributing more money to the district than they now do.
But they could if they were contracting for other services, so that's a possibility.
Which they might, they probably do.
So, going back to that question about moving students around, so I'm assuming it just wouldn't be available to those parents who have the luxury of driving their kids to school. Is there a transportation budget that would be?
We currently, because of special ed services and intensive programming and that sort of thing, we have the bus network that is able to take students from Guilford to Academy School. We have buses from Brattleboro and Guilford coming up to Dummerston. So we do that now. We have a pretty good network.
It's a good sized chunk of the budget that has to be.
But it's already in there
It's already
for the
in
most part.
place.
Yeah.
Follow up for Frank again on the tuition piece. Would it be a statewide rate, or would it be the per pupil cost that exists in the Brattleboro High School?
Yeah, so there's a statute that basically dictates public school tuition payments, and so the the union, whether it's Brattleboro Union High School or this merged entity that we're discussing under these articles, would have to follow that statute, and it would be the announced tuition for the entity. So whether it's BUHS, right now that tuition's about $14,750. That's the announced rate based on the state, guidelines. And if this system merged, whatever this system calculates as its rate would be what Vernon would pay. Just like Dover does, just like Marlboro does. Any town that's not a member of this union pays those rates.
And Richard.
And
No,
those
so-
tuition rates don't include things like special education, that would be a separate contracted service that would be direct billed back to Vernon, the sending school.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, there was some talk early on when Vernon announced that they were going to withdraw, or wanted to withdraw. The Agency of Education said they might not be able to purchase services from Brattleboro. Has that been clarified?
No.
So it's a possibility they may have to hook up with Dover or
Right,
some other school.
it's the state board and the Agency of Ed that makes that determination, so they might have to be assigned
Which
to another
means you wouldn't
district.
get tuition from Vernon.
No, they would still,
Send their kids?
they would still be allowed to tuition their students.
Oh.
But in terms of contracted services,
That's good.
we can't just say, we'll take Vernon in. They may be assigned another district, a more like district, like Dover that has some school choice.
But they still
options.
send students.
They would still tuition students.
Ron, can you define the contracted services?
Well, like for special ed, for professional development, special ed is a big area.
So for those things, they would be through.
They as a single district cannot operate on their own
Okay.
for those services.
So kind of like bureaucratically is through.
Staffing, special ed staff. It's now a consolidated system within WSESU, all of our special ed staff and programming, so they have to get that somewhere. And so it's not like we're just gonna assign teachers to Vernon if they're not in our district. They would have to contract with the district to do
You're
that.
talking about the K-6 portion?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yes,
I was
yes.
confused, I thought you were talking.
Yeah, I mean, their high school kids or their middle school kids that come to BAMS in the high school get all those services through tuition.
Now I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
If they pull out of BUHS, that doesn't necessarily mean they're pulling out of the supervisory union, though, does it?
Well, it depends on if the merger goes through, the supervisory union is eliminated, so.
Right.
Yes, if the merger doesn't go through, then yes, that is to be determined what the structure would be, as Stephen Morse indicated. The state board has a plan, and that, if there is no merger, then we would be subject to the statewide plan.
On the theory that we're all stronger together, what happens if Vernon is not allowed to leave by one town or another? What happens to this merger proposal?
Well, we were gonna discuss that after December 13th.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've got some ideas, but I mean, part of it is, and one option is the state board configures what the district looks like.
Well, not until 19.
Right, but for 2008. There's a couple of other options.
For Vernon.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the sequence of events is coming right up in that as of November 30th, 2017, any unmerged district has to report their plan to the State Board of Education as to how are they going to meet the goals of Act 46. And then it's the following June that the Secretary of Education will consider the state of the structures that are unmerged at that point and make a recommendation to the State Board of Education later that year, and then essentially the statutes indicate the State Board of Education will make a recommendation for the state plan.
And they may extend that time frame.
Well, there's three pretty powerful legislators who proposed legislation to extend the time frame and also to deal with choice and several other items on Act 46. That's a good reason for actually slowing down the process, is to see what happens legislatively. And even though Stephen and Emily indicated that it may or may not happen, we don't know. We don't know to what extent the changes are going to be made. We know there are some going to be made, but we don't know to what extent. So I think it makes good sense to kind of slow down the process and see what happens, and then you deal with a new reality.
Okay, I'm going to ask Frank to comment on that, and then we're going to move on.
So that would make sense if the various provisions for the transition are not important to a community, but there are a significant number of transition supports for considering a merger. So if a community doesn't vote before July 1st of 2017, so right around the corner, then we know for certain the current law says we will lose the $150,000 transition grant. We will lose the small schools grant. For Dummerston, I think it's about $30,000. Guilford, it's a significant amount of funds. We'll lose this provision called hold harmless, where 10% of the Guilford students are essentially, they call it a phantom calculation, so that the cost per student impact is not as severe. Putney's in a similar position. 5% of their population is considered the phantom student category. So those provisions, in addition to this, whatever you want to call it, I believe the law refers to it as a tax incentive. That's an 8-cent incentive. We know for certain that if communities don't vote by November or by July 1st, 2017, you lose all of those supports. And those are very significant
It
supports.
was interesting to hear Stephen say that, you don't do this for the money.
But we are talking about.
But we're talking about money again.
Well, we're
And
talking
this
about
is-
timeline.
This is what the study committee has done since day one, is talking about money.
So I would encourage, did you have anything else to
And
say?
Frank, the small school grants are gonna go anyway. They're going to be transferred into something else by the legislature.
Their name changes to merger support.
Yeah. Merger support.
But it doesn't, the dollars.
Right.
Yeah.
Do
But
you have
that doesn't
something-
mean we'll get it if we don't vote for it. That goes to the mergers.
We need to keep moving. Frank, did you have anything else to
That's
say?
it.
Okay, let's. So, you want to do that?
So this is something that what happens to the school portion of town meeting. it has been something that the study committee struggled with, particularly the smaller towns, because town meeting is is part of the fabric of our local communities. Brattleboro, it's not such a, the take has been that it's not such a drastic change. But what will happen is the town meeting will, you're gonna have the vote about the unified budget. And then your community would nominate the 3 members of the leadership council at town meeting that, will be appointed by the unified board, and then you would have community discussion and budget input at pre-town meetings with the leadership councils and the district board representative. And then, the unified budget is gonna be voted by Australian ballot. So you wouldn't be able to alter things from the floor like we currently do now. So it would definitely change the fabric of town meeting for smaller towns.
It would also bring in a little more discussion about the high school budget.
Yes.
That right now, the high school budget is not really looked at as hard as any of the other budgets, I think it's fair to say.
But not at town meeting, you wouldn't have any of that discussion.
Yeah.
No, there's no discussion.
Because the high school budget's gonna be part of the whole budget.
In the pre-town meeting, but in your pre-town meeting now, I don't think you guys go over the high school budget any more than we do, yeah. So it would be something that would be new, and the town, all of us would be voting on the whole budget, which would include the high school budget.
Which is like
So there would be
$57 million.
a new gathering in each community, assuming the community wants to do that, which I know Putney would very much want to do that.
And we discussed too the fact that the leadership councils could still give a presentation on
Would,
what's
yeah.
going on in the school, so that there's still a discussion about the school, not discussing the budget, but there's so much more that goes on in our schools than the budget, and that would be a forum that we could do that.
So what may a unified board be looking at initially, and this is sort of what I think, I don't know your name, Michelle. So there are a lot of things we really can't talk about in detail because it's not appropriate. A new board would be responsible for talking about it, but there's some really exciting stuff that could happen. And I'm convinced if any of the people on this committee are on that board would be happening. Preschool, Putney now has a preschool in the classroom. We pay a teacher and two folks to work with her in the classroom. It's a full day pre-K. That could happen at other schools. Magnet schools, all of our communities, all of our schools have pretty unique cultures. We want to sustain those and grow them and share what we're doing amongst each other. Schools could become magnet schools. Putney could be, a farm or could focus on ecology. Dummerston could focus on sports. Not be focused primarily on those things, but key parts of the community. Universal meals. Putney's been trying to do universal meals for years. We're really looked at as strong farm to school community across the strait and now in the nation. That could be shared.
I think you should say what that is. Yeah.
So I just want to say, universal meals, it's free breakfast and free lunch for all students. Now, Brattleboro Town is able to do that this year because of their poverty rates. Putney is very close, Guilford's very close. We can't do it because of the extra cost. The first thing that will happen in a unified district is all students will have free breakfast and free lunches because we have a combined number of the free and reduced numbers that would qualify all of our schools to be offering free breakfast and free lunch. That's a benefit. You can't do it now because of cost, but it's a program benefit more than anything else.
Arts and music, technology integration, social services, summer programming. Summer program I think would be get expanded pretty quickly. Field trips, language, place-based learning projects, based winter sports, recreation. Now, I think one of you talked about this happening years and years in the future. That's not certainly what we're thinking. We're thinking that it would take a year, several months to get grounded. This new board would have a lot to do. So so we or they would not want to be jumping into decisions. But it would take a year or two really to get things going. Does someone want to jump in? Some ways our schools will be different. For example, right now we have one school with a pre-K class. Expansion of pre-K classes to additional schools, something that could happen and something that we are excited about seeing. 2, personnel is hired by a single district. Personnel can move among schools depending on need. 3, additional programs too expensive to add to a small school budget. Additional program costs spread across, making pupils, making programs more affordable. Ron has already talked about this. Challenges faced by individual schools confronted alone, limiting program in many ways. For example, in Guilford often, challenges faced by schools problem solved through a wider lens.
Can I comment?
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up in Putney is probably might have occurred to somebody here in Dummerston as well, is the personnel is hired by a single district and can move. Was the concern that suddenly the unified board would just be yanking, someone actually said Molly one point, and taking her out of Dummerston and throwing her into someplace in Brattleboro just because we wanted to. But that already could be happening in Brattleboro because we have 3 schools and we're one district, so technically by law we could be moving people and we don't.
Doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen, and so I wouldn't see it happening here. Like Lyle is laughing and she's kind of got a role to play in that, so it just doesn't behoove us in the Brattleboro district to do that, so the unified district as well. Now looking at staffing to the right numbers and being able to share when it makes sense, absolutely, that's what we're thinking of, but just yanking someone just because was not the thought.
And the other point, or the other option, or advantage there too, is that, you know, right now, each of the districts is an independent employer. If, for example, you had a teacher in Guilford and the position was eliminated and or they moved to, say, Dummerston, they need to turn off their benefits and then sign up again once, you know, because they're separate employers. Whereas with a unified district, you know, it allows for an easier flow, that there's less disruption to the employees, and
even though they're under the same
correct
contract,
yes.
They would lose their.
They get W-2s, like the example that Jill gave about the art teacher that's being shared between Guilford and Brattleboro. That person gets 2 statements from employers.
So do we call this the Administrators Relief Act?
I don't know what you're talking about, Paul, so.
Well, if it reduces the work for the administrator, I think, you know, it makes
No, I
their
think
work less work.
I look at it as an advantage to the employee. I think that is.
But the teacher's not gonna lose her benefits and not gonna lose her status as a teacher for how many years she's taught by doing
We have
that.
someone has been holding her hand up.
I just had a question. Would reduction in force happen district-wide? So like, say one school had just hired a new teacher, and then there was you know, the numbers, that graph we all don't like that's dropping, required a reduction in force of, say, 3 teachers. Could that lead to a situation where, like, Dummerston's brand new kindergarten teacher had to be reduced and a teacher from another, yeah, you know what I mean?
Possibly, yes, but we're spraying also retirements out over a larger pool, and it's very unusual that we would have a RIF without a retirement, so that we could easily slide a teacher into an open position through attrition.
We've hired 30 new teachers every year for the last 3 years. I don't see that 30. Yeah. So I don't see that changing. It's because we have a aging staff that's retiring, and so you get that type of turnover. So I don't see that changing. What's that?
I feel it.
I do too.
So unifying provides options. Students won't have to leave their school if their family moves to another one of the 4 towns.
That's in Article 17, I think we mentioned earlier.
And this is one of my favorite things. One student might benefit from a small school setting, another would prefer a different school dynamic. That's the, you know, the 7, 6, 7, 8 issue. Some kids living in Putney really want to be in that BAMS environment. That could happen. Some Brattleboro residents, kids, parents will want to send their kids to smaller settings. We know that, so it'll be interesting to see. Teachers and other school staff could have their children attend the school where they work. Unifying provides an opportunity for students to be in a school that best suits their needs. There are numerous educational benefits for individual children and their classroom communities when children are allowed to remain in the same school during their elementary schools. Creates stronger classrooms and good continued advancement. School choice will be capped so that no one school is adversely affected. Amy, you want to?
So, you know, the realities of our school systems are really changing. As we mentioned earlier, we are having some significant shifts in socioeconomic and some condition as well as societal challenges. And it's important for us to be open and embrace and adapt and try to meet these students' needs as best we can, so that we provide them with the structure and support that they will need to become successful, functional adults.
And I think that's a good slide to talk about the fact that we need to remember that each of our schools is in a little bit of a different situation or scenario. And I try to bring this up, and Guilford is in a unique, perhaps right now, but maybe not in the future, but unique situation in that the Guilford board looks at this merger opportunity as potentially a lifeline to keep our school open, which may be contradictory to what many people believe Act 46 will do. But the sustainability of our school and the model, it's really difficult, and our board is looking at our budget for this next coming year. And it's gonna be a real struggle, and so this merger is something that our board is super excited and almost desperate for. And so I just want people to think about those different realities in the different communities as we have this discussion.
I'd like to follow up, sorry, for just a second on what Beth is saying, because if you look very cold and very hard-hearted at the Guilford numbers, we could take, in the Brattleboro school system, we have 5 classrooms of each grade. And if you take 2 kids roughly in each grade and plop them down, or do we have 6? 6, sorry. And if you plop them down, we've assumed and taken over all of the Guilford kids at no additional cost to Brattleboro. And yet we've been sitting here at this table for over many months because we all see the value, including Brattleboro staff and administrators, and we're talking of keeping Guilford open. And that's one of the main reasons that we keep sitting here and thinking about how do we make this work so it's good for all of our kids. This program, this is not about what's good for just the Brattleboro kids, the Dummerston kids, and Guilford. It's all of us together under this model.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think that's great. I think that I believe that we want to close that school, but would the elected official who have the fiduciary responsibility of the taxpayers to make that decision to close the school strictly on a money basis? It wouldn't be whether they're being mean or not. It's just you have to do it.
No, but in a merger situation, what goes through everyone's head then is, let's look at all of us together. So does it make sense to shift kids around somehow to keep Guilford more viable? If there's 3 schools in Brattleboro, does eventually it means that we somehow consolidate some of our schools, that we keep the outlying schools open? It becomes a much larger issue for the entire unified board of what makes sense. And part of the school closing language that we've talked about and are going to return to it is what's in these communities, what makes sense? I'm picking on Guilford as long as we're talking about Guilford. What's in Guilford besides the town school? And then there's a general store that's located just down the road from Brattleboro.
Doug Richmond's there.
So there's very little industry and business in Guilford proper. And so does it make sense as a community for all of us, and it's a unified board decision and discussions, that we try to keep these small outlying towns open, or does it make sense that we try to be as efficient and cold about it? Is that the only thing that matters?
So
You're right, the board would be, but it's the taxpayers are the ones that are really gonna push.
So,
Question
how Brattleboro feels about paying for
Been
that.
had his hand up for a while, so, yeah.
Beth, on what basis is Guilford excited about the possibility of this resulting in them being able to keep the school open?
Specifically, what we're facing coming up is our BAMS agreement. So Guilford has struck a BAMS agreement in 2013, I think it was. And it's an incrementally increased tuition rate every year. And we're at the end, it was an agreement for 4 or 5 years. And anyway, we're up for renegotiation in 2017. And at some point, the law requires us, equitability-wise, to pay the rate that everybody else is paying. Right now, we're paying a deeply discounted rate. Once you bump us up to pay what other people would pay to go there, it becomes questionable as to the sustainability of that.
So this would keep your tuition rate low?
It would mean we have no tuition, because we would be part of it.
Right.
So that entire tuition bill would go away. And to be honest, all of the discussions about the programming, like, really hits home for us, because we've talked every single year about we desperately need a behavioralist in Guilford. We can't afford a behavioralist, but at the same time, we can't afford not to have a behavioralist. So you have these conflicting interests, and at some point, sustainability comes into question.
Because I'm just wondering if Dummerston School is able to maintain its excellent academic program now, and our population is declining, wouldn't we be attracting other kids from within the district to our school to be in this program, which would take away a fear of needing to close the school because of declining enrollment? I mean, I'm not asking you to answer that,
Yeah,
I'm just...
I'm not sure that I understand the question anyway, so.
That makes sense.
Sorry, do you think sense from being on the board in Guilford of what your residents in Guilford feel? I mean, are they sort of behind this and the board behind it as representatives of the town, so you guys are all together?
Yeah, so we've had multiple town forums like this, and I wish desperately they were as well attended as this one is. They haven't been. If we have 5 or 6 people, it's a really good night.
It probably lasted a shorter time.
Yeah. But I will say that in those public forums, we have 100% had people that we've changed their minds, because once they've come and they've talked to us and they've realized the constraints that we're under and the situation that we're in, they have changed their mind. Are there people in town that disagree with us? Absolutely, but there always are going to be. I think the fact that we've got 5 very independently minded people on our board, and all 5 of us feel the same way, and have friends and community and relatives in the town that also feel the same way. It's hard to say what the true representation is, but.
And our first meeting was quite.
The first one was, yeah.
Well attended, and it kind of struck me kind of funny that the ones that we've had since then have not been, and the comments of people leaving there, the first one were like they really felt like they were supporting, you know, we felt supported by them. There was a few questions and concerns, and you know, the answers that we were given to them, I think made them feel more comfortable.
And I think if it comes down to we need to increase our budget by X number of dollars in order to be sustainable versus close the school versus this merger opportunity, it makes it a little bit more clear, I think, from a lot of people.
I always want people to hear too, whether the parents and the taxpayers want to renege and just take back their 7th and 8th graders.
Absolutely not. Yeah, you're right. That's a good point, is that I say that the BAMS agreement is what is kind of putting us in this situation. There's not one single parent that I've talked to that would change sending their children to BAMS. Every year, the school board at the beginning of the year invites the BAMS families and the students from BAMS to come to our meetings and share with us their experiences, and it's overwhelmingly positive for BAMS. They would not want to change that.
Guys, we have one more slide and then we'll do questions. So Frank, can you take it?
Sure. So even though we've talked a lot about cost not being a driver, it is a reality though. At the end of the day, we have to fund school budgets. So here's an analysis of taking fiscal year 16. We did that so we wouldn't have to project and guess at future state formulas, future spending assumptions, and enrollment statistics. So we took approved budgets that you would have voted on last town meeting, and they're in your town reports. We put them all together, and we removed Vernon. And this is what a merged district would have looked like if it had have gone in retroactively. We also did, you see the note up the top, reduce the proposal by $500,000, which is about 1%. Based on the savings that are noted in the document that you have. So what this represents is the 52 million collective merged system, reduced by the revenues, which we've talked a little bit about. Vernon tuition would be part of that 14 million. This is the way the state school funding formula works. It takes school board approved budgets that also get approved at town meetings, and it subtracts revenues that are not directly dispersed from the education fund. So things like tuition, special education aid, transportation aid, that sort of revenue. That's 14 million in our fiscal year 16 period. That's a $38 million what's called education spending. That's a term that if you go to a website, a lot of that number is referred to a lot. In our system, we would be 2,319 students. That's that line 4. And the funding formula to derive a tax rate basically takes education spending divided by equalized students, and it produces a cost per student, $16,371 in this example, and then it compares it to a state index. It's announced every year. Very close to $10,000. Fiscal year 16, it was this line 6 there, 9,459. And it creates a ratio. It says how much are you spending as a system relative to the state index that's announced each year. That ratio in our case is $1.73, 1.73. That's translated into a starting point on which everyone applies the statewide property tax. Okay, so in the fiscal year 16, that's line 8. The $1.73 actually gets reduced because that year the statewide rate was 99 cents. So there's our tax rate if we were a merged system. And concerns about if we merged, is somebody going to pay more or less? That's what lines 26, 27, 28, 29 reflect. Those are the actual rates that if you go to your town report, you would see the equalized school tax rate for the Brattleboro Town School District was $1.71, Dummerston $1.79, Guilford $1.69, and Putney at $1.78. So some variation as we are separate. But if we merge, we would be eligible for that 8-cent incentive to address all of the transition issues that we've talked about. And we would be looking at a merged rate of $1.63. So in this example, you see everyone has a reduction between 4 and 9% on the current taxes. And there was a reference to, well, how do we think Brattleboro will like paying more for all of this additional programming that is being talked about in Guilford? Well, the reality of it in this retrospective view is they wouldn't pay more, they'd pay less.
For 1 year.
Or if you go to line 9, line 9 is before the incentive. They're still paying essentially the same. So we see that this is beneficial to all of the entities because Brattleboro Town is also facing declining enrollment, as you saw in those charts, and it's just a matter of time before they're in a similar situation where declining enrollment will require revisiting affordability for programs. And just maybe one other point that Beth made, when you look at this chart and you think of a $50,000 behavior specialist at the Guilford budget, $50,000 divided by their 100 students is $500 a student. It goes right into this formula. It's pretty simple. That 500 would be divided by the 9,459. That's the tax impact. That's a 5% tax impact just for that one program. As you look at the document that has been passed out, the study committee, there is a extensive list, you saw it on the slide, of many, many programs that can be shared. And I think Stephen Morse characterized it pretty well in that many of them aren't going to be new money spent. It's the ability to share programs, extend programs, have the ability for students to go between different programs and not be restricted by a simple geographic boundary. So there's a quick overview.
Thank you. And really too, another thing to point out too, it's not the study committee's choice, it's the town's choices. The voters have the final say in all of this, and if it doesn't sit well with any one particular town, then this merger would not continue. It would be defeated. So, you know, the group is trying to present, in the slide at the beginning, an option based on the law and of Act 46 plus other statutes that restrict the things that we can and cannot do, and come up with some type of workable solution that really addresses all of our communities, well, not all of them, but the majority of our community feeling about our schools, and really is focused on children and what we can do for them and how we could even do better for them than we currently do now. So.
And I will say, we're going to open it up to questions. I'm impressed by how long we've been doing this tonight. You guys must be a little tired. We're used to it. I do want to sort of second what Amy has said, but also share, remind us that this is a two-stage process. So for many of you, this is the first time you're digging into this topic at this level. If on December 13th all towns vote to release Vernon, you will be hearing a lot more about this in more detail, unless you don't want to hear about it at all, which I can totally appreciate. But the key thing is that on December 13th, regardless of how you feel about this merger, Vernon has asked all of us to release them so they can go ahead as they see fit for their kids. And I know some of us are conflicted about that, but we need to respect them, and I would encourage you all to go out and give this some thought and vote as you will, but do understand that our towns all might be asking the same of us at some point in the future, and vote on that day as you would hope for Vernon or another town to vote for you. I know you guys, many of you are going to meet again, so let's try to keep it for a few minutes if we can, since we've already had a lot of questions. Do put up your hands, because a lot of times you folks in the front leap in, and there are people behind you who haven't spoken. So yeah. Go ahead, please.
One way to increase enrollment would be to have businesses move to Vermont, and a lot of businesses pay non-resident tax rates. How is this Act 46 going to influence the residential tax rate? Will it help incentivize businesses to move here, or will it have no effect whatsoever?
Can you answer that?
I mean the non-resident.
The non-residential rate.
Yeah, actually, the non-residential rate is not affected by Act 46, and it does vary from town to town. Some towns, the business tax rate, the non-resident rate, is less than the resident rate. I believe that is the case in most of our towns here in Wyndham Southeast.
The reason being is that businesses tend to be building rich, so they don't have the land, or they don't have the homestead allowances. So they're paying high taxes even though the rate is lower because they have lots of building.
Well, yeah, and you know, to some extent, that's an extension of the 1.6 billion that Vermont commits to every year in public education, and there are the legislature. Emily might want to speak to this, but the legislature has to look at what folks have approved at town meeting collectively, and then they look at the state, the grand list. Of course, that's accumulation of every town's grand list. That's where that dollar or that 99 cents comes from. They look at, well, how much will that raise to fund the commitment to public education. And my point is that as the total cost continues to rise, as we've seen, the non-resident, the business tax rate, has to be part of the funding component. This legislation specifically doesn't affect this rate, $1.63, you know, is derived completely differently than the business rate. However, I'm just suggesting that if this accomplishes what is anticipated based on what we saw with consolidation of 20% of what we do in public education, which is special education services, we've seen across the state a lower cost for providing those services as a result of this merger, single employer model. So it's anticipated that when we go to the 80%, we would see a similar effect.
So in other words, the non-residential would go down as well?
I wouldn't make a promise on that, but I said it, you know, I think it would not be unreasonable to assume that would be.
So it might attract businesses and therefore more students, so it's another positive.
You had a question?
Yeah, I have a few things that I've been saving for the end. But since this tax page is up, I'll just to get back to my question to Stephen Morse at the beginning, because, and this really, you know, this has nothing to do with whether or not the merger is a good idea, but the fact that Act 46 doesn't, it almost undoes what Act 60 tried to achieve, which was to level the playing field monetarily by making towns that could afford to vote higher budgets send some of their tax money over to towns that couldn't. And what we have happening here is that the Dummerston and Putney get great savings in their tax rate, while Brattleboro doesn't. And I mean, you know, with the 8 cent, we all benefit a little bit, but that goes away. So, you know, our Act 60 leveling effect goes away, and I got to assume that the legislature is going to hopefully address that later on, but we cease to be letting Brattleboro benefit from our higher or lower poverty rate. And so that's sort of ironic to me, because the equity issue that we're trying to address is really not whether we have French in one school and not in the other, you know, or bicycles in one school and not in the other, or it's really the issue of the performance gap, right? Between the students that are much lower socioeconomic position than others. And that is what we're seeing in the state. That's what's glaring. That's what we've not been able to solve, correct?
No.
So, no.
If you look at Brattleboro Town, and you look at Oak
You guys are
Grove,
doing an incredible job.
all I'm just
but
saying
across
is
the
there are ways to attack this. And if you look at Oak Grove and Academy, they have close to Academy 74% poverty.
Right.
Oak Grove is, and they're off the charts.
It's
And
amazing.
it's because of staffing that we're able to dedicate to those areas that other school districts in our supervisory union can't afford. And that's the crime of this. You can't, because you right now are the highest taxed school district in the state. And when we try to look at technology or other services, it just puts you even further over a penalty cap.
That's correct. That's true.
More questions before I adjourn?
I have one comment to follow up on that. I think, Frank, if you could, well, I'll say it and then you can correct me. But one of the things that has been striking to me is the Act 60 and the discussion of, somebody said it earlier, well, if we want more in Dummerston, we've just put more in the budget and we've paid it, and you guys have paid the cap, or exceeded the cap and paid a penalty from my understanding many years, right? So, what? But in any case, none of us in the supervisory union, except for Vernon last year, actually pay in what we take out for the state. And one of the fellows at our representative meeting in Brattleboro was really, it became a comical moment, but it's quite sad. He said, so tell me, today we're voting on a budget, how much is my tax? And the disconnect that happens from the Act 60 law is huge.
But of course, that won't change. I mean, that's still the case with this merger. We're not addressing any of that.
But I think we're at least starting to recognize it.
Well, we are though, Sam, because of this, as you see, the disparity in the rates now exists at line 25 through 29. That disparity goes away. You will have equity in a tax rate over several towns. So you are addressing.
But we're not addressing the disconnect between the budget we vote and the tax rate we pay.
But we are getting to Act 60's goals, which originally were it was the same issue that we're tackling today, and that in 1996 Act 60 recognized that we had tremendous disparity in outcomes, and we had tremendously disparate resources to address that. Well, it did create a much more level playing field on the resource, but it did not allow us to address the educational opportunity when we remained separate autonomous units where we don't share success, we don't replicate programs that are known to improve learning and so on.
Okay, I get it.
Oh, you had a question?
Yeah. Question. So you're talking about special education services, and you're talking about how you've seen improvements in the Brattleboro School District. And I have a child in Academy School and a child in Putney, because they're stepchildren. But if you're seeing improvements in the Brattleboro school districts, because you've got large numbers of kids that are needing special education services and you're using the services there, how do those transfer to the smaller schools? And how would the child have to move? Would the teachers move? How would that?
We were forced to consolidate special ed services 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we implemented that over a 2-year period. This year, we changed the student to staff ratio from 1 to 12 students to, 1 to 7.5 students, that was just by numbers,
right,
to 1 to 12. What that allowed us to do is share staff more with other schools that we haven't had a chance to do that with. Mm-hmm. We're actually able to train our paraeducators as behavioral technicians, so getting them more training. Those are the people that are with some of the students that are the most challenging and they have the least training. Mm-hmm. In the process, we didn't intend to do this, but we saved $300,000 in that process. So right now, we have better services in the outlying schools, much like we've had in Brattleboro for several years. We need to continue that because, again, in our articles and the program opportunities, some schools are still not getting the STEP behavioral interventionists. We plan to do that in all the schools, and as we develop budgets this year, it's not based on the merger, it's based on that previous consolidation that we'll be able to do that.
I think what happens often in bigger schools is that there's more children that maybe don't qualify for special ed that are still getting services, and that's not happening in smaller schools, and that's a big problem.
Correct,
I've
it
seen.
is.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I don't mean to beat a dead horse about the Vernon thing, but I'm really trying to understand it a little bit better, and I just am curious if I just don't want it to be lost on this whole community that they're not doing this because they would lose their school choice, correct? I mean, is that accurate? Or are there other reasons?
They're doing it because if they merged with us, they lose school choice.
Correct.
So
yes. So I hope that is not lost on this entire supervisory union and this
whole community of Southern Vermont and the Dummerston school community, that is such a powerful, powerful benefit that they are willing to go it alone and become their own school district, and that they still send 80% of their kids to BUHS. Absolutely, school choice is not the big bad wolf, clearly. And I just wonder, were there any conversations there about, sure, come on in, Vernon, maintain your school choice, and for equitability, we'll give it to everybody else too in the district, because I know that's legislative. I don't know, you might not have the power to do that, but Act 46, seems to be a little bit of a crisis, which is an opportunity for change. And because so much of what you guys are doing is providing flexibility and choice within the district through this, but then it stops right at the high school. And with Act 66, the Flexible Pathways Program, which is different pathways to high school graduation, I'm just wondering, is there a big missed opportunity here for WSESU?
That's a good question.
We did
Vernon, because of advice from the Agency of Ed, originally felt like they could be part of the merged district and maintain their school choice. We were told that for a long time.
Yep.
And then it was more recently when they actually decided to pull out. I don't know if it was
February.
June or July.
February or March, we got
Oh,
a
right,
letter
right.
from the state reversing the decision, from the AOE reversing their decision about Vernon's ability to maintain high school choice. And then, I think it was March, they officially said we're out.
And we did discuss letting them grandfather for a while.
Yes.
And we
And we
did discuss
discussed us
having
all
all of
having
us
choice.
have school choice.
And what happened with that conversation?
They didn't want to choose to be grandfathered.
The whole district having?
And the second part of that is, financially, that would be a huge detriment to the rest of the district. If all schools had school choice, I guaranteed small schools would close. They couldn't function.
Yeah.
If they lost 30 kids,
Yeah, it disrupts
they'd
the
be
apple
done.
cart for sure, and, it's.
Well, it's not disrupting, it's closing.
Which might happen with this too,
With what?
with Act
This?
46.
No, in fact, again,
We could-
I don't know
we have
how you can hear it
crystal ball.
more
I did, I've been
differently.
listening, and I agree, I went to Guilford School, my kids were in Guilford School before they came here. There is no guarantee that that school would not close, I mean, that's just reality, nobody has the crystal ball what happens. Once you do something, anything can happen if you open it up, so.
Or if you don't do something.
Yeah, that too. I mean, I think I'm not opposed to this by any means. I think it's really interesting work that you guys have all done, but again, it's the idea of rushing it. Have we looked at everything, anticipated everything?
So what we haven't talked about tonight is all the things we have looked at. And so if you are interested and have the time, you could go back and read our minutes and watch the videos. There are a lot of things we talked about that we were interested in exploring that just we weren't allowed to explore because they don't suit the confines of the law. One more, okay. So you've spoken several times, so I don't know.
Actually, I was
Okay.
waiting and waiting and waiting to get back to this. And
Okay, well-
I wanted you to finish your slideshow
So-
because I knew that I would be able to ask questions at the end.
Right. And you've asked a couple, so you and then
Thank you.
and then the gentleman behind you, and then we'll end.
Question for Representative Long. Seeing as you're here. I'm going to refrain from any opinion on Act 46, but the merge seems like it's small ball, you know what I'm saying? Trying to pool all the resources in 4 small town districts, 5, so why not a bigger model? What about a county model? Where's the cutoff point? You know what I'm saying? And so, as this comes along, and as this process rolls to an end, and the Department of Education starts making decisions, could it quite potentially be bigger? Let's just say nothing happens here, okay? Then they start looking at all the schools in Windham County, let's just say. And then would there be any possibility of that happening where they say, we're going to pool all your resources and you're going to figure it out yourselves? And then are they going to look at that equity in that pod, and then they're going to go up to, Heartland and look at that pot and say, well, these guys don't have the equity that these guys have. And you know what I'm saying? So it seems like kind of, small ball down here going on. You understand what I'm saying there? And is anything like that a possibility? And have there been any discussions like that?
So the process of Act 46 is that you go through an approval process to show that you're meeting the law. So if people have gone through this and have a positive vote, and you've heard there are a number of them who have done that, they're insulated from any changes as long as they've gone through the process and had an approved vote. So that won't happen in this law. Now, I can't, those who have merged, and you've all talked about what happens to those who've chosen not to merge. They still have to show that they're meeting the goals of the law. I will tell you that in the legislature and certainly in House Ed, we had on our wall, we have draft legislation that sits on the wall and gets taken off or not, that has proposed models like that, several of them that you're describing, where they are county-wide or based around tech centers. And many of them are pretty attractive to a lot of people who look at them for a couple of different reasons. One being that many of them suggest that you get to keep your local school board. But when I asked questions of witnesses who were testifying to our committee about that draft legislation, I asked, what happens is there a regional board? Yes, there's a regional board, so there's a county board. And where is the money funneled through? I mean, does it go directly to the local board or not? And the legislation, from anything we could get from people who were proposing this, was that the money came to the regional board and then was fed out. So I was very concerned because for me, and look, I grew up here. I'm a lifelong resident. I live in Newfane, grew up in Newfane, went to Leland and Gray myself, sitting on the school board up at Leland and Gray. I've been on the school boards for 22 years. I don't want to see our small schools closed. I don't want to lose the connection that we have with our schools and our communities. So for me, that was too far for us to go in this stage. I fought very hard to try to keep the conversation local, and I really believe that Wyndham Southeast, even though we all feel very powerfully about our local school and our local community, Wyndham Southeast is still local to all of you, just the same as Wyndham Central is to us. And so I fought very hard to make sure that we were keeping local voice in the conversation. And one of the things that I thought was most powerful about it, and I think I'm looking at it in this room tonight, which is a conversation that has not taken place since I've been a school board member and much longer than that, where we get to actually say what we value about education. And I'm afraid we'll lose that if we go too far away from our local. But I caution everyone who asks me about this law. I know there's people who will say it's going to change or it is going to change. Well, the legislature is the one who will make the decision around whether it'll change or not. And I have no wisdom any more than any of you about the legislature, but I can speak on my experiences sitting up there. And while I know the pain that many of us are feeling when we go through this, it's not universal, because there are a lot of school districts that are in a lot of pain right now and are really fearing they're going to lose their local schools. And they are welcoming this conversation. And they are telling their legislators that they welcome this conversation, and they're welcoming the opportunities that they are seeing presented during these really powerful conversations that are going on in communities. It's unprecedented, and it's fantastic. And as far as I'm concerned, based on my years of experience in this, looking at it from a school board member and now as a legislator, this could possibly be our last opportunity that we have if the demographics keep going in the direction they're going. There were questions, I know you had a question in the back about what our state looks like in attracting businesses. Well, it's not just you know, it's not so easy to just draw businesses in here. There's so many challenges to bringing business into the state, working, you know, we have very high property taxes. It's really challenging for people to find childcare, jobs with a livable wage. You know, I could go on and on about all this. These are the things that we're dealing with all the time. But the focus is on improving our economy so that we can attract businesses. But it isn't gonna happen fast enough to save a lot of our local small schools. And I really worry about that. So I think that I support school districts and communities for having this conversation, and they need to make the decision that's right for them. And for some of them, it may be, we don't wanna move forward in a merged district. You know, the law allows for alternative structures, and if communities are making that decision, then that's what they should be able to do. The law allows it. But the law also says that you have to meet the goals of the law. And those are pretty powerful goals, and they're really important, because what our job is to educate kids. It's not to keep our communities vibrant as much as I want our schools to keep our communities vibrant. I want that, and I see the value in it. But our job is to educate kids. So we need to be held accountable for making sure we're doing it. And the state will hold us accountable for that. So.
Emily, can I
Yeah,
just
sure.
ask you a question to follow up on that? Have you and your committee looked at any proposals? Have any proposals been introduced or proposed around the supervisory district modifying itself, if it's possible? We don't know that it is or it isn't. We've got a good central office. Couldn't that be modified in some contractual way, perhaps, to become a single employer and unified funding, where all the school districts throw money into a district fund, so that all that cost sharing can occur, the equity can occur, property taxes can be lowered because efficiencies can be created?
So if you're still talking about keeping separate entities in a supervisory union, it can't. Once a supervisory district happens, then you've got one board. So that's
But I'm just saying, can it be modified in some way through contractual agreements that would provide the same end result, but would provide
You
local
have
voice?
the opportunity to do that today. And I would say that there are a few school districts, and supervisory unions, and I think Wyndham Southeast is one of them. I'm certain Wyndham Central is one of them, and I will tell you, there's a fellow sitting over there on the other side of the table who helped us with that in the time he spent here in our SU. We are doing a pretty good job. But what I keep, you know, in the 22 years I've been doing this, we've never been able to actually get out of our silos far enough. Because we are responsible for our own, the law is that our school district is responsible to educate our kids. And it's really hard to take the step away and say, well, I really do care about Jamaica, you know, equally as I do Townsend or, you know, Guilford and Putney. It's just really, it's counterintuitive for us to actually merge in that way. We've done it as best we can, and I think we've done it out of desperation, honestly. And I think the law that merged special ed, which was 153 or 156, that merged special ed, 153 it was.
Yep.
I think that's a necessity. It was a necessity for us to do it, but it took legislation to do that. And I think that's sort of been recognized in the State House, that if we're operating within instead of without, and we offered the opportunity, or they did, I wasn't up there then when Act 153 passed, it was purely voluntary. You know, one school district, one supervisory union took advantage of that at the time. And then a couple others have followed up when they saw the letter, you know, the lay of the land coming, and they did sort of, there's been an MUSD and a couple other things done since then. But it didn't appear that it was gonna happen voluntarily. And so this is an opportunity to do it on a voluntary basis, in that it's very flexible. I've been criticized so many times for the flexibility in this law. I know people in this room, I heard them say tonight how we need it to be more flexible, but honestly, I've been criticized many times that it's too flexible and that there's not enough direction for us. We don't know what, we have too many options, we don't know what we're gonna do, we don't have enough time to deal with all the options. And I understand that, and I worried about that when we were working on drafting this legislation. But I also thought it was even more important that we all had that time to have that conversation. To me, it really was about talking with each other, and then talking across our town lines with each other to see if there was a way we could do this in a better way for kids. And if it happens, benefit taxpayers as well. And one other thing I just want to say about that is that I know a lot of people fear the 8, 6, 4, and 2 going away, but I hate that it's called incentive, because it's never been intended as an incentive to merge. It's always been in place, which it came in place under 153. It was designed to help school districts as they merge, bring multiple different tax rates together to try to mitigate some of the highs and lows, level them out, and at the same time give you that 4 years, and in the accelerated it was 5 years, but 4 years, to start to have the conversations that you'll have if you do merge about how can we do this more efficiently. And so at the end of that, the idea is, and I believe it's already happening in the ones that have merged, the conversations are showing us that school districts, new boards, are starting to say, wait a minute, we might be able to do this in a different way, and we may be able to reduce our spending at the same time. So the goal is for still to be driven from this level, not from the state level down. And I know people feel like this is state down. I understand that. I feel concerned about that myself. But it really is our choice to have that conversation and make a decision. If we're not successful with Act 46, that doesn't take away the issues that are still coming down the road. That I can tell you is a given. And I don't know what the next step would be, but I fear it won't be as locally driven. That's what I think. That's what the proposal is.
Did you as legislators look at what other states had done?
Yeah.
And the impact on those states and where those programs?
Yeah, no one operates like us. No one in the country, and I have spent years at conferences with school board members from all over the country. I've been on the national conferences. I've been on the School Boards Association for multiple years, going to these conferences. Nobody even understands what we do. When I tell people we have 260 school districts, and some of our school districts have less than 20 kids or 30 kids in them, they don't even understand what that means.
But look how well Vermont does.
And we
so why are
welcome
we going to
that.
throw it away?
It's not. It's literally not about throwing it away. And I value how powerful our community's voice is in the work we're doing. But we are at a point where we have to talk. We can't not have the conversation.
Emily, I really appreciate you bringing that up. It was really very passionate, and I think that was tipped me off to something that I've been wanting to ask for a long time. And I know you and I have chatted a bit, but and forgive me because I'm very blunt, but this is, in my opinion, a smokescreen with numbers, because all we're doing is massaging the tax rate here under the guise of helping schools stay open. So the state budget, 1.6 billion, is not going to go down because of this, and if it does, it'll be short term. And if we go $500,000 proposed here, which I think is a stretch, and there's 60 SUs in the state roughly, that's $30 million. Over 1.6 billion, that's less than 2%, okay? That is short term, because once we start making everything equitable and adding everything, costs are gonna go up. So really, the elephant in the room here is the $1.6 billion education costs. Once we give up our local control, which you spoke so passionately about and you're worrying about it, we won't be able to then respond as easily to another top-down state missive. And so, let me just finish. You can respond, and I'm happy to have you do that. But you made the comment that if Act 46 isn't successful, you fear what will happen next. I fear what will happen next, even if, because nobody talks about it, but that is the inevitability. That 1.6 billion is everybody's hot button issue in the state, and we're not going to get away from that. And so if we give up our local control, we're going to have a lot harder time fighting that. So that's my worry.
So the only response I would have is, if we don't move forward with that, if Act 46 wasn't in place, I mean, I can't imagine anybody in the room not seeing that the same costs were gonna continue up.
But that's not the argument being given.
Well, I'm just saying that the costs are increasing, that's a given.
And I
It
think there's
really
ways
is.
for us to do this without Act 46 is my point. And we're one of the largest, we're the fifth largest SU, we're not one of those districts. So
Right.
I understand if we look at it through the state lens, but as you mentioned earlier, I'm a school board member, my lens, my fiduciary responsibility is the town of Dummerston, the people that live here, why they came here, why I came here. And I do think that one size fits all. So I understand the problem you're having as a legislator, I don't wanna be in your shoes. It's not an easy one, but it is, important for people to know that this is coming either way, and what's the best way for us to deal with it. That's my opinion.
Yes, Alice had to leave, so I don't know, yeah, by default. So I don't know how much longer we wanna go, if we wanna give it a couple more minutes, and then I know the Dummerston board has offered to stay around and talk with people further. So, you know, we wanna make sure we give them an opportunity.
What is in the future? You said there's going to be an additional forum in Dummerston. When is that
Yep.
scheduled for?
We definitely have a date of December 6th.
That's
That is
the
a.
burden.
No, can I finish?
Yeah.
Okay. So December 6th is a warned informational meeting. It's required by statute, and that is about the Vernon vote that takes place on December 13th. And all that week of December 5th, I think it is, we're going through each one of the towns. We don't have to do Vernon, and we don't have to do the BUHS district, so it's gonna be Brattleboro, Dummerston, Guilford, and Putney. That we'll be going through and having these information sessions to have discussions about, you know, the implications of Vernon's potential withdrawal, and then talking, you know, and then depending on the outcome of the vote, we would have other informational meetings between middle of December to prior to town meeting.
I just want to say I'm disappointed in terms of the lack of publicity for this meeting tonight. Most people don't read the meetings box in the Reformer. I don't know where else this was that the general public would get the information.
I put it on the town email list, I put it in the Reformer, I put it to the Digger, I put it to the Commons.
Well, the Digger comes out tomorrow, or, yeah, Wednesday.
Okay, well, you know,
The town one came today.
Came at 3
So
o'clock.
I'm just concerned about the major issues in terms of the general public being prepared to vote on these issues.
Yep.
Dummerston probably has the better turnout. I don't know what you had in Brattleboro.
The first one we had for, the end of August was very well attended.
Yeah, but since then,
You had
and
one.
you know, bringing people along, so you're having a relatively small number of people that are getting educated.
Yep.
And there's gotta be a better way of getting more information out to people.
well, the BCTV has been extremely helpful. I don't know about, I think other study committee members and probably board members too, I get a tremendous amount of feedback about, oh, I watched this episode and I have questions or feedback on it.
Alice
So
and I are
it's been
also
a really.
working on a video to have on the website so people
Yeah.
can see short clips on whatever part they wanna see, not listen to
Yeah.
3 hours of us.
Yeah. Sam?
I just would like to get back to the board representation really
Yep.
quickly and just add my voice to the,
The opinion that I think it would function better as a representative board. You know, if that means 6 from Brattleboro and 1 from each outlying town. The reason is not because I think Brattleboro votes as a block, but because the board would function, I think, much better as being answerable to its constituents. I think that I've been a member of a very large school district with a at-large board. Nobody knew who they were. You see, it's like when you go and you vote for, well, we don't do it in this state either, but we'd go and vote for judges. Nobody knew who they were. If you have the representative from your town, you know who to call when you have a problem with what's going on with the school district. you know, that person's responsible to you. If it's an at-large, then it's that much more removed from your community. And I think that preserving the community's investment in the school system is very important. And the local school council, that's great, that's really good, but I think that the board makeup is very significant. It will keep that investment, the outlying towns, and Brattleboro as well. If you're voting for 6 representatives versus 10, you've got 6 to call rather than these 10 people who may or may not care about your problem. So I really think that would be a better way to go, and I don't think it's going to be a detriment as far as, you know, I don't know if you're imagining that there's going to be infighting or some sort of small towns pitted against Brattleboro. I don't, that's not the issue. I think the issue is more how well the board functions and how well the members of the district are invested in the board, so.
We've gotten, I mean, it is a huge issue still.
I understand.
And we're still, you know, hashing it out, and at our most recent study committee meeting, our work session, we talked about weighted models of voting, where, you know, you have maybe 2 members from Dummerston, for example, and their vote, even though you might have 1 vote, you would have 2 voices there, and that, you know, their vote would be half and half. But, you know, we have to worry about statistical variance, you know, to meet the requirements of statute, and, you know, it's really, it's quite a challenge, but, you know, the study committee as a whole is really trying very hard to maintain the local voice, and be respectful to our communities, so that, you know, when and if this would to come to our communities at town meeting day next year, you know, you'd have a choice, you know, that might potentially be viable. So, and just in terms of the proportional representation too, we've gotten feedback from BOHS board members, not necessarily in favor of the proportional model, because that's what they use right now. The smaller towns often, and one of them shared with us that they feel a little outnumbered, you know. But
I think of when you think about, would we rather combine with New Hampshire and have 4 senators and vote as a block? You know, who would you call? So.
But, you know, it is, all of this is really difficult stuff to talk about, and I know one of the things that comments we got from the Putney Forum is that we seem very unified. And one of the things I was thinking about was, you know, I did the actual calculation. We've met over 30 times, and that for work sessions. That doesn't include all the additional time that people have spent doing investigations, or discussing with the AOE, or working with Ron and Frank and Lyle, you know, to delve into programming issues. And when you calculate it out, you know, we've spent in excess of 1,100 hours, and we do not necessarily all agree. And in the beginning, if you go back to the very beginning tapes, you know, we were a pretty dysfunctional team and of people. And I think that one of the really great things about this study committee is that we've been able to work our way through this process, and you know, maybe find some common ground about our schools and how much we love and care for our students and our schools and our communities, and that I find is the thing that keeps me coming to every work session. Yes, it is very difficult conversation, but it's in the hopes of maybe building a better future for our students and keeping our schools open. You know, it's a difficult conversation, but you know, it's been really meaningful and rewarding. I don't know about you guys, but.
Madam Chair, this is warned until 7:50, and so
Yep, so thank you all for coming. There will be more coming up. There's one in
So if
Putney
anybody
on
from
Thursday.
Dummerston wants to ask us any questions, you hear how we feel, or if you want us to hear how you feel, we're here tonight for that. If you want to go home, we agree with that too, but not.
Thank you.